You're listening to Well, I Laughed, Part 1 of The Hills We Die On, Friends in Weird Places.
Hi.
Hello, Grant.
How's it going?
It's going.
Our lovely friends woke me up this morning with our group chat, which was before 8 a.m. Can I add?
It was so early.
It was so early, and I'm like, could I please be loved in like an hour and not right now? And then once I woke up, I was looking at everyone's Instagram and stuff, and I was like, oh, of course, Tyler went on like an early morning bike ride, and God knows what Danny did this morning. And so I'm like, oh, everyone's day's already begun, and I'm still laid up in bed.
But it was like 8 or 9.
Thank you. I think like that's the whole purpose of like a sunrise bike ride, though, is to like be up with the sun.
Okay, well that's dumb.
Listen, you and I are on the same team on this one. Mm-hmm. But I was just like, okay, gonna put my phone on silent. Hope Maya doesn't need me for anything because we're recording this morning and I'm gonna go back to bed.
I had to finish my notes, so when you texted, you're like, I'm awake. I was like, excellent.
Yeah, you're an absolute insane person. On Thursday, we had a quick little chat on Thursday just about like getting everything ready, and you were like, on Thursday, I think I'm going to read just this book for the story that I'm doing. It's just 400 pages, and I'm already like a quarter in, and I'm like, that's nuts. That's nuts. Did you finish the book?
I finished everything but like one chapter, like in the middle. After a while, it got repetitive, and so I just like skipped to the end. But then I still read the last like 3 chapters. And the chapters were like, took like an hour to get through. Like there was only 10 chapters or something like that. I don't know. It was crazy.
Voracious reader. I also finished a book this weekend. I had been reading mine though since February. So different reading paces, and that's fine. You know, we all read.
I felt like I had to do something special because this episode is the closest one to be released next to like the day that we initially released.
Yes, our anniversary.
Yeah, so this is both you and I's anniversary episodes. And when I found that out, I was perturbed because the story is... Well, you'll see.
It's just a silly little fun time.
It's a silly little story. So I wanted to do a little bit more digging, and so that's when I found the book and was like, well, why not do something a little bit special? And so I read the book. There's so much fucking information on
I love that.
This.
Good. That's what always happens.
People kept diaries.
I thought you were saying dying.
No.
People kept dying, and I love those stories too.
No.
Because when I told you, oh yeah, your next episode, The Hills We Die On, that's our anniversary episode, you were like, oh, I should maybe then do an actual topic then. I was just going to do like a silly little story. And I think you kept the topic, yeah?
I did. I fleshed it out a lot, so it's not just a silly little thing anymore.
So
it'll be
buckle
good.
up, folks.
It'll be good. Did you catch the tremor in my voice?
Yeah, I absolutely did. But I'm prepared. We are both kind of beverage goblins right now. We just need water to complete the trifecta. Maya is reaching for her bottle. We have mimosas and iced coffees because it's morning.
It's morning time.
And by that we mean almost 11.
It's fine. That's the appropriate time. If I'm up before 7, you know it's gonna be a day at work.
Yeah.
Or something's very wrong.
It's funny to me, when we record these episodes is the exact time I assume you guys listen to these episodes, like exact time of day.
Yeah.
Like I'm assuming everyone's going to be listening to this on a Saturday morning, and you're almost definitely not. And so it reminds me of a comment we got on Patreon the other day, and it was from, I'm not going to say their name, didn't ask permission. FYI, I'm, quote, listening to this kind of late at night, buzzed like we all are.
Yes!
I was like, good, I'm glad someone can appreciate it. They're like in the right state of mind.
That is the only correct way to listen to the Patreon episodes, though, I will say. Those ones get a little unhinged. Like this, I can see listening into the morning, there's an agenda. The Patreon is really off the rails. But I had something else to say and I forgot what it was. Oh, we're recording this incredibly late. So we're usually 3 weeks ahead. This episode that we're recording right now releases in a week and a half. So this is like the closest we'll probably ever be to like reality from when you're listening. But anyway, the theme, as a reminder, is The Hills We Die On. And so if you have a listener story, let us know.
Right, we're back to listener stories because mine isn't going to be a 2-part episode.
Oh, good.
I did it once. I had like 2 weeks to prepare. I know what my topic is.
And if you sent us a listener
Nary
story,
a document written for
that's fine. That was how this was.
Good.
if you sent us a listener story for In the Bag, we'll still read those.
Yes.
We'll still look through them.
I think we're getting to the point now where like part 3 is like, oh, maybe an Am I the Asshole, but then just like a bunch of listener stories.
Yeah, that's the idea.
Which I love. Let's see what else. Oh, when this publishes, it'll be my last day of school with students.
Woohoo!
Wednesday, May 30th. Super crucial, obviously, that we come back after Memorial Day when all of that learning happens.
Yeah, that's dumb.
I'm actually pretty sure today, when this publishes, Wednesday, May, what is that, 29th, 30th?
Something like
29th. This is the day we collect all the students' computers.
Oh.
And then they still have to go to school tomorrow.
It's also, that's one of the big things that's crazy to me about school nowadays is that like everyone gets a computer. That's wild.
No. What's crazy that every child has a computer and none of them know how to use it. So like I'll collect something and then do Control-C and then move it over to a document and Control-V just like real quick. And they'll be like, how did you do that?
Did I tell you?
Wizard.
I was on a Teams call with my boss and I was showing him a spreadsheet I made and I hid one of the sheets and my boss went, oh my God, what did you just do?
Don't delete it.
And he was like, I was like, I hit it. And he was like, I'm going to do that on every spreadsheet I send every client from
Welcome
now on.
to what grinds my gears with Grant and Maya. So here's the thing about young people today.
Yeah.
No, but what's so true, we just assumed, we've been having a whole conversation around education, I think, recently.
Yeah.
There was this assumption, I think, made 5-10 years ago that because these kids are going to be raised with keyboards in front of them, that they don't need a keyboarding class. But many of them, and it slows down, like when we try to do research and papers and stuff, do not know how to properly, like, keystroke.
You gotta do those keyboard games.
Yes. The only thing they really know how to do is there's a command feature on the keyboard that can immediately switch it to a different window.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll do that to hide their video games, but it's such a specific keystroke and they don't know any other keystrokes.
That it's like when you see it, you're like
Okay, well now I'm going to look at what you're doing that. Or like they'll play like video games with the arrow keys. And so from across the room, I'll be like, Maya, stop playing video games. And then she'll be like, how'd you know? Because I don't believe in Go Guardian. I'm on a whole rant right now. I don't believe in Go Guardian because if you're only getting the kids,
fuck is Go Guardian?
that's where you can spy on their computer screens.
Oh.
Right. Well, just to make sure that they are like productive.
No, I mean,
but like we're
fair.
trying to build like a work ethic, and if you're only doing it because you're being supervised,
then you're not building it.
Not a work ethic. Yeah.
Yeah,
So anyway,
positive reinforcement.
I will instead just publicly shame you from across the room. Maya, get off video games, and everyone's like, ooh, and you're like, who's even playing video games? And I was like, you don't need that many arrow keys to go through your Google document. I know. I've seen your Google document. You know, teaching's great right now because none of it seems to matter at all because it's May.
I love that.
Because we all get to say, oh gosh, sorry, one last thing. I hope this was what you wanted to talk about.
I rarely have control of what we talk about. You know that.
I want you to know I too rarely have control about what we talk about.
About what you talk
The
about?
spirit just kind of possesses me
that's
and we
fair.
move forward. We're just at that point in the school year where like everything means and matters a lot, but it's also all made up and no, it doesn't. Like there's a crucial cohort of children who we need to get across the passing finish line. And that also means that like we're kind of done assigning new assignments.
Yeah.
So for the kids who have A's, it's like
Nothing matters.
a little bit, yes.
Calm down.
100%. Like if you could just kind of not be a problem, I will show you interesting things for the last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
As I like drive, turn it in to about a third of the class.
Nice.
So that's where I'm at right now.
Oh, yeah. And we went to a play.
We did. Oh, that's right. You met some of my students now.
I did.
Miss Warner.
That was unhinged.
Chaperone to play with us.
One of the people, we like went to the DCP, and so one of the ushers came over to like ask if we were gonna stay for like the after talk
talk
or
back.
whatever, and I was just like, you'll have to ask Mr. Thomas when he comes back. And after I said Mr. Thomas, I was like,
I just had to put respect on Grant's name. Like I can't. That and when you first joined us outside the theater, one of my students goes, "Mister, isn't this that lady who does the podcast?"
No,
with
the
you?"
first reaction was, "How do you know this woman?"
Who are you? What do you want?
And you were like, "She's a friend," and then the student just went, "Huh?
That's an Edna Mode reference that I just did.
Yeah.
Who are you? Wait, what do you want?
What do you want?" Yeah, it was pretty funny.
I'm glad you got a chance to see them, because they are in many ways little shadows of myself.
They're hysterical to watch. Every time there's 2 intermissions in the play, and Grant like left to go to the bathroom or whatever.
To stretch her legs.
Yeah, and so I just kind of like stayed there and just watched the social dynamic of the kids that stayed.
We had 27 children downtown.
Fascinating, absolutely fascinating.
A lot of shuffling in between both intermissions,
which was like really awakened the like fight or flight response in my body. I was like, stay in the same seat. What's wrong with you?
There was a point during Act 3 where I got out of my seat for like 10 seconds. Do you know what I did?
You were telling the like couple to stop making out?
So I don't know if they were fully making out or not, or if they were just like refugees on a ship pulling into New York Harbor, Statue of Liberty,
cuddled up
cling to each other.
The entire time. I was like, your armpit's gonna smell like his BO, babes.
I had to come up to them and go, let's go ahead and put a little bit more distance between our faces right now. And then they kind of gave me like a look, and so I shot them a look. If you think you can beat me on looks, babes, you're wrong. I'm a 30-year-old gay man. And so they weren't happy about it. And I've talked before in the past about not trying to like shame children for, part of the... But part of me wants to be like, it's weird and makes everyone uncomfortable.
Everyone knows what
when
you're
you
doing.
Guys do stuff like that. And remember that third friend who you guys were talking to before the play? Did you notice how she's now seated very far away from you? Because it's weird what you are doing right now, okay?
It was so funny.
If every dark space you're in is just an opportunity for you two to cling to each other like koala magnets, then no one's safe after 10 p.m.
It was also just such a good play that I was like, you're missing it.
And it was such a good play, and in no way was it a rom-com.
No!
In no way.
It was so good.
In no way was it heavy romance themes.
My favorite thing was that Grant at the beginning of the day was I had to tell my first period this morning about the 2008 financial housing crisis because that's going to be like a topic of the play. And then like halfway through the play, you'd like turn to me and you were like, now, in my last period, I'm going to have to explain what the Great Depression was.
And I did. And I really did. But it's okay. It was actually so great. So we got back from the play, and I'm just absolutely...
The play is...
the Lehman Trilogy.
Yeah, the Lehman Trilogy.
Super good. It's at the DCPA right now. So period 7 we walk in. Period 7 is also an advanced class, so it's just the kids that were at the play. And obviously I don't have any lesson plan prepared. I didn't know when we were going to get back from the play. We did a theater field trip. The kids weren't going to do anything because they had missed 6 of their 7 classes. But like you can't, like admin can't walk in and see all the kids on their phone and not do anything. That's how you lose your job. And so I am instructing them, and I'm talking about like subprime mortgages and like mortgage bundles and like how like that messed up this, and then like once everything becomes foreclosure, then the asset like lost a lot of its value, and there's like a lot of charts going up and down and stuff like that. And in the middle of all of this, when my principal walks in, and but it's like one of those moments where it's like so lucky because this is the only class I've taught, and if you look at my whiteboard right now, I am teaching, babes. I am in those trenches
like a madman walking
exactly. And for the most part, the kids are tracking me because they're trying to figure out what plot details they missed during the play.
It was so good. During the first intermission, there was like a group of girls sitting in front of me, and one of them turns to the other one and was like, man, if history class was taught like this, I would have an A. Which
is so hard because 1, sometimes it is and you still don't want to listen. And 2, like no one has 3 hours and like prop sets to explain the housing crisis.
Voice acting skills.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, and then there was one of the boys, because I know some of the kids go just because they don't want to be at school.
Yeah.
And like, mama, pop off. Like, I'm good. Like, good for you.
Yeah.
But one of the boys turns to me, and he's one of the ones that I was like, are you even going to like be happy that you're here? Or are you just going to kind of, you know, they're never disrespectful, but that doesn't always mean they're enthused, you know? And he goes, this is like a great play. Like, this is maybe the best play I've ever seen. You gotta keep in mind, they've seen 2. That was a sophomore that I was talking to. We don't start bringing them on their field trips until they're sophomores usually. This is like his first year of theater ever. And I'm like, oh, I'm glad you like this more than Cebollas. Yeah. But that's fine. That's fine. So it's been good. And I'm glad that you got a chance to see me in action with my students.
Yeah. There's a lot of counting.
Yeah, you got to make sure you have 27 at all times.
I was going to ask you how many kids there were just so I felt like I could be productive. And then I was like, let's be honest. I don't want to do that.
They're all in uniform, so you can kind of guess which
Yeah.
one's mine. But
Yeah.
yeah.
It was fun.
It reminds me a little bit, and this will be the last story I have. Before
I have
we
one
can-
last update. I got bangs
Amazing.
and nothing's wrong. Next.
Do we want to linger on that more?
No.
And also, the entire morning I've been looking at your face like, this is new?
Yes.
This is new?
Yes.
But I just don't know if my hair like got out of
No.
bed or if this is like an intentional hairstyle.
No, that's intentional.
I like it. It
Thank
looks
you.
very good.
Thank
but I
you.
was like,
I woke up and
I think
chose
it's
chaos.
different.
Yeah.
Did you do it yourself?
No.
Okay.
No. I had a hair appointment on sometime last week, and I was like, we're doing it, but not fully. This is a transition phase. If I like this, and if I can trust myself, because right now these are nice, because if they're not styled, they just look like my regular bangs. This is the test. If I can manage to style these.
Do you know what you call them when it's that kind of bangs on a boy?
No.
Slut curtains.
Yeah.
Because boys just don't ever really have bangs, and so when they do, and they're like kind of curled to the side,
yeah.
it's like here's the
And
show.
also that involves styling, which I love.
100%.
Yeah.
Oh, this wasn't the last story, but now
good.
it's going to
Yeah.
be walking into the bathroom with like a clump of my students at the DCPA right before the play starts.
Oh, yeah.
And because we were just on like a bus for 40 minutes because of traffic and stuff, like all 5 of them go to the big wall of mirrors and sinks and start checking and fixing their hair. And it's so funny to like watch them all do it. Not like in a homophobic, toxic masculinity
but,
way.
like-
It was just like synchronized dancing almost. That obviously I had to take the empty sink in the middle and fix my own fake and imaginary hair, and it killed because I'm hilarious.
I do love that.
They're fun.
Speaking of homophobic and toxic masculinity, have you
Hard
seen
transition there.
the graduation speech from
Of course
Harrison
I have.
Butker?
And then you've been seeing all of the internet stuff
Oh my
afterwards,
God,
right?
yeah.
You know what I feel really bad for in that situation?
His wife?
No. Oh, sure. I forget he's married.
Same.
The Missouri cheerleader he hooked up with, male cheerleader that he hooked up with. You know that rumor, right? No, shut up. Yes, you do.
No, I don't.
I thought that's what you were transitioning to.
No, I don't.
Oh, no, the guy that gave the misogynistic and homophobic speech? Yeah, famous in Columbia, Missouri on Grindr for hooking up with the male cheerleaders.
Yeah, that does make sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like every single time someone has a huge platform and is like, do you know what I want to talk about for the next couple minutes? Gay people. It's almost always like, oh, yeah, I bet
But
that's
why?
a tough secret for you
Yeah.
to carry, you know?
Yeah, Abby, I hadn't heard of it until I think it was like Monday or Tuesday night last week.
Good for you. That's really
And
healthy.
Yeah, I was just busy doing our finances.
You loved it. You got to make a
I
spreadsheet.
did. I made a really cool spreadsheet, guys. But Abby sent us a TikTok, or sent me and Maddie, like, have you guys seen this speech? And she sent us like a reaction video that was just the clip of him being like, one of the most diabolical lies that's been told to you is that like you need to be a woman or whatever.
successful in your career.
But like all of the women I know, like their life is going to begin, or what you're looking forward to most is getting married and starting a family. And the video pauses and it gets stitched by this like, what if I had seen this under any other circumstances, I would think he was a Republican. He just went, this is a kicker. And that was the end of the video. And I was like, nice.
Yeah. No, yeah. I mean, you know, I'm glad the Chiefs won the Super Bowl. I'm sorry, that might be controversial. You can cut it later if you want. And they won because of his like field goal cooking, but also at the same time, like kickers are not that expensive.
No.
Like you can absolutely cut
And
him.
also I like wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding, right? So I watched the whole speech.
Why?
I was feeling vindictive.
Okay.
Probably. Had to take out my anger out
Part
somewhere.
of me wonders, like, oh, my did not grow up around a lot of like religious dogma speech in the way some of us did.
I did, but by the time, I feel like my switch was so fast in like middle school that it was just like immediate, and then I didn't like, I don't know, I also didn't grow up like Catholic or anything like that. But
Right.
at one point he quotes Taylor Swift by saying, he was like, familiarity breeds contempt, as my teammate's girlfriend would say. And I was like, you know that's not original, right? You know that's been around for like forever. I think it's also in the Bible.
I think it's like internet influencer, what's her name? Trisha Paytas?
Yeah,
You know
I
who
know
I'm
who you're
talking about?
yeah.
She goes, I voted for Biden because he quoted the Hamilton musical. And the interviewer goes, "What?" And he goes, and she goes, "Yeah." He said, "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal." And he's like, that's in the Constitution.
Oh my God!
Listen, a win is a win, a vote is a vote. Like in elections, it's just matters who you
the
pull.
Fans of the Hamilton musical are so funny because there's a non-zero percentage of them that do not know that the musical is not based on reality.
It reminds me of the people who go, "Wait, the Titanic was a real boat?"
Yes!
So here's the thing, too, about the Hamilton musical. The Hamilton musical is so 2015 nostalgia, back when everything felt so innocent. And I can say that because I was in college in 2015. That everything just felt good and bright and shiny and possible. And then America made a series of choices. I am actually eager to hear the story.
Yes.
And I feel like this last week has been busy, but not in like a fun way, but like in a
Also,
business
Grant and I
way.
have not recorded in like 2 weeks, which feels
I
crazy.
was gone too. I ran a whole national tournament thing, whatever.
Also, Grant's about to run a half marathon tomorrow.
I am, and that's why this has to be the last alcohol I have.
Boo.
I know. But then I took Monday off. So.
Oh, perfect.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, you did tell me that.
As you pull it up, I also thought ahead and purchased my breakfast material for Monday when I wake up and I'm too sore to like really walk out of the house.
I love that for you. I keep thinking this Monday is Memorial Day.
No, that's next Monday.
Yeah, that really
I don't
that
work
really
on
messes
Monday
me up.
the rest of the year.
That's so nice.
I know.
I'm so jealous.
It's 2 3-day weekends and then summer break.
Okay.
Anyways, yes.
Are we ready for the story?
I'm ready for my question. And if there's not a question, I'm going to be...
There's not a question.
So now I'm devastated.
I'm so sorry.
You can make that up for me as long as it's Abraham Lincoln.
There's not a question at the beginning. There will be a question at I'm going to do an intro, and then we're going to swap to a slightly different topic. There will be a question there.
Listen, are you
It'll
the
be
master's program I'm in right now? Because I can take notes. I also, we'll talk about it on Patreon, I've already gotten a waiver from the dean for something. Because I'm insufferable.
Yeah, you are. Anyway.
Tough but fair. Tough but fair.
This episode had so much content that my plan was to find a little anecdote to start off with, and I did not have time because, as Grant said, I read a 400-page book.
Right, which is crazy because you went from there's a little information to so much information.
Mm-hmm. They're true. If you Google this topic, there is a little information. And then suddenly the world opens up.
So you found an article from the New Yorker.
No. Just kidding. I don't remember where my articles were from. We are going to go to, where are we? Late 1800s in the UK. And we're going to be talking about the Irving family. The Irving family.
The late 1800s.
Late 1800s.
UK Irving family.
Irving family. The Irving family's matriarch and patriarch, in that order, are Margaret and James Irving. They are 54 and 58, respectively, during the time of the bulk of this story. They were both born in Wavertree, which is a small suburb of Liverpool, in the late 1800s, and they got married when the couple were around 20 and 24. Quick side tangent already. James's father's name was John, who was an engine driver, and his mother's name was Elizabeth. Margaret's father was also named John, also an engine driver, and her mother's name was also Elizabeth.
So they're much like Anne and Thomas.
Yeah.
There's just 3 good names.
3 names
floating around.
Yeah, it's insane. So they have their first daughter the same year as the wedding, and their son, her name is Elsie, and their son's name is Gilbert, who was born 3 years after that in 1901. So I've heard this story before. When I found out that there were 2 other children, I was shocked.
Okay.
There was one child that I knew about, and I thought the entire time she was an only child.
What are the names that we've learned so far?
Elsie and Gilbert.
Elsie and Gilbert. Mm-hmm. And have we heard the name of the third child yet? Okay.
She's going to come in a while.
Okay.
So the family moved around a little in the area of Liverpool, Wavertree, but they tended to stay in the Wavertree district and lived in nice housing, they weren't necessarily affluent by any means, but they were also not poor.
Sure.
They had one domestic servant, so
they're not going to die of dysentery right away.
Yeah. I think some source said that their house had 7 rooms. So
wow.
Yeah.
I don't even know if my house has 7 rooms.
I don't know if my house has 7 rooms. So Margaret was a dressmaker. James was a agent for Dominion Organ and Piano Company, selling pianos in the UK. And apparently he was high up in ranks. The company is Canadian, but he's like the power of attorney in Britain at the time.
Nice.
So he's like, he's up there. With this income, or with this job, his annual income is £600 a year, which at the time, with inflation, it would be £92,000 a year, and then in US dollars, it would be $116,000 a year.
So they're doing okay.
They're comfy.
That was the dad or the son?
The dad.
The dad, okay.
The son is still
a child.
Yeah. So people refer to James as educated, able to speak a smattering of languages like German and Yiddish. I think the district he lived in had a lot of Jewish people.
Well, the more languages you speak, the more customers you can sell to.
Exactly. Unfortunately, World War I happens.
Right.
And the piano biz took a downturn because something called the McKenna Tariff was passed. Do you know what this is?
No.
Okay. It's a wartime tax passed in 1915 intended to save cargo space for essentials.
Oh, interesting. I thought they were going to go after the metal that they use in like organs and stuff. Okay.
I mean, maybe, but I think he was mainly a piano salesman. I don't think he sold.
So they're like, while the Germans are sinking boats off of the coast of England through their submarines, let's not have there be a lot of pianos out there.
Yeah. There is a 33.5% tax on all luxury items.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, which included cars, clocks, watches, and pianos. That was what my source said. I don't know why two of them are timepieces.
Cars, clocks, watches, and pianos.
Yep. There's probably more, but those were the four that were listed. I was like,
so they're just taxing those really heavily, or they don't want to be shipping those right now.
They're just taxing them really heavily.
Okay, because it's like
shipping.
I don't feel like clocks maybe, but I don't feel like watches are taking a lot of room in a ship. But I'm no shipping magnet.
They also didn't have. I don't know if they had like battery powered watches back then. They probably all were like the expensive like Rolex like handmade battery or.
But is that still taking up a lot of space?
It's not taking up a lot of space. I think it was more so to...
Let's get a lot of money out of this. Okay.
I don't know. So, what would you do in this situation, Grant? I'll make up a question for you.
So, I'm James.
Yes, you're James.
I was making a lot of money.
And now you're making no money.
And I speak a little bit of languages.
Yes.
I think I'd probably start spying on the British government. Who ruined my life?
I like it.
Wait, shut up. Am I close? I was like, I chose the most ridiculous thing possible. Okay, then the actual answer, I would make my own pianos.
Okay, that's actually like not far off. He didn't make his own pianos, but he did start like an engineering business.
With you, I'm just prepared for it to be like he did make his own pianos out of human orphan bones. I'm prepared always for like the darkest thing when you give me stuff like this.
This story is gonna have almost no dark matter.
I need you to know, every time you start off with like, there's a perfect little family in England that has a couple children, I'm like, who does who and when and where and how? Tell me quickly what's the story.
Tell me quickly what's the story.
That's a Victor Hugo reference if you didn't get it.
Or Les Mis.
Yeah.
So what he does is he tries an engineering business. Engineering business doesn't really work out, so he tries real estate, as I think everyone does at some point in their life. And he invests £310, which is half of his, had been his yearly salary, which is the equivalent today of £34,000 and $43,000 in US dollars in 2024, to buy a property called Doarlish Cashen. Doarlish Cashen is on the Isle of Man. Do you know what that is?
Yes, it's in between the island of Ireland and the UK.
Yep. It's a pretty big island. Yeah. Doarlish Cashen comes with 70 acres of farmland surrounding it, and the nearest big town to Doarlish Cashen is Peel. The house itself, however, I think is part of... Actually, I'm not sure. It sits in between two smaller villages of Dalby and Glenmay. Both are about like a half-hour walk away, but it sits kind of up on a hill, so it's not necessarily an easy walk to get there. So he buys this property. He never intends to live in this property. This is supposed to be an investment, but he ends up needing to move there because of the whole economic situation.
He has to move to the Isle of Man. Does he bring his family with him?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. So we're going to talk about Doarlish Cashen for a little bit, because this was also information that I had no idea about, but I find it like super fascinating, especially for like the bulk of the rest of the story.
Do the British treat the Isle of Man like they're Alcatraz? Like there's an island.
Little bit.
Okay, that's every time you find an island that's close to a major country, you're like, I bet they put a lot of prisoners there, didn't they?
Yeah, we're going to talk about it a little bit briefly. That's hysterical. So Doarlish Cashen is halfway up the slope of Dalby Mountain. In 1916, Irving bought the house, and he thought it was no more than 130 years old, but he's not an expert, even though he considered himself a like knowledgeable antiquarian is what he called it, or
And
something
it's
like
like
that.
Britain during the early 1900s, so he's like, it's a new build, 120 years old.
Yeah. So by his estimation, he thought at the earliest the house was built in 1786, but there's reason to believe that the house is way older.
Okay.
The stones are not held together by mortar, but earth, which is like a really old technique, similar to the another build that was more concurrent or more confidently estimated to be built in 1350.
Okay.
So it's like an old boy. There's a quote from a historian at this point that says either Doarlish Cashen was built at a very early time or its builders reverted to the ancient practice. So I would venture to guess it's just old. Historians also believe that the home belonged to someone important because it had 2 floors instead of the usual 2 rooms of the like farming area, and it gave a good vantage over the surrounding land. There's also a well on the property that's believed to be the deepest well on the island, indicating that many people probably relied on this well.
Okay.
300 yards southeast of the house itself, so probably still on the property, is a prehistoric mound. 50 yards northeast are the remains of a cairn circle and a cairn grave dated back to the Bronze Age. The nearby fields, there's a tumulus, which I'm not sure what that means, but it was excavated in 1850 and since then thought to be a Norse burial ground.
So he bought the oldest structure on the Isle of
Probably.
Man as an investment property.
Yep.
If you were about to tell me about Viking ghosts, I'm actually really excited. Damn it.
No, that would be really cool though. Apparently the person that excavated this tomb or the burial ground, this is a quote, this person informs me that on digging into the mound of earth on his farm about 8 or 10 years ago, a complete human skeleton with a battle axe by its side was found and distinct traces of its haft visible, which he forbore to disturb, which is something I would like to institute. If we find old shit,
Leave it
stop
alone.
fucking messing with it.
Listen, we're a couple years removed from 2020, but let's just go ahead and keep things where they are.
Let's
100%.
just, yeah, no one move. So the farm was believed to be focused on livestock instead of crops because the soil was, I think, in the book quoted as modest or something like that.
So not good.
Not good. So like I said, Irving never actually intended to live at Doarlish Cashen, but because his engineering thing didn't work out and the property management thing didn't work out, they now have to move there, and now James is like, time to become a farmer.
And you know what I think is so great about this story? It's really just like an allegory for life, you know? Sometimes you think, I'm just going to sell organs for the rest of my life. And then...
And make a lot of money.
Right, and then some Serbian nationalist down in the Balkans shoots the Archduke of Austria-Hungary, and then 2 years later, you're moving to the Isle of Man, Like, isn't that funny how that works?
Yeah.
We actually had a conversation with a student who doesn't even want to go to their own high school graduation because they were going to go play basketball at, like, a D2 or D3 school, but like got I think at least a partial scholarship.
Okay.
And then the scholarship got taken away, and he was like, I don't even have like a future anymore. And I'm like, well, it's not a terminal diagnosis.
Yeah, you're fine.
Right.
You'll figure it out.
And so part of me has like, and that's the tough thing about working with
Yeah.
kids. You're like, oh, you don't even understand how like trivial this moment
You're
in
fine.
your life is.
You'll be
right?
okay.
Right. Part of me is like, I mean, there's like still like 400 other basketball programs
and also
out there.
student loans.
Right, exactly. But that's not what they want to hear at the time.
No.
So I just always like to share them a stories of like, when I was at a crossroads, and the punchline of that story was, and do you know what I did that day, kiddo? Do you know what I did? Go ahead and say it like
What'd
a high
you
schooler.
do?
I took my ass to California. I got in my car and I did the rest of the dang thing.
You're gonna be
let's
okay.
get you to California. And on that stage, let's go, buddy. Didn't work. Did not work. No. But that's all right. That's all right.
My senior year prom, at this point I'm like having a little bit of an existential crisis just because I feel like I don't have, or like, I didn't have the typical high school experience of like partying. I was never like in that crowd.
I actually want to point out that your experience is the typical high school experience.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I'm saying that like scientifically speaking.
I think I was... Annabelle doesn't listen. I think I was closer with Annabelle at this point, and she was part of that scene. So every once in a while I would hear about it and be like,
you were just a loser.
Yeah. At my senior year prom, I had heard that a bunch of like the footballers and like their partners or girlfriends were gonna take like a party bus, and like inevitably there was gonna be booze on said party bus. However, and I was like, damn, that sounds cool, whatever. And so like my friend group also got a party bus, but there was like no funny business or whatever on the. I mean, they not saying that the people on the party bus didn't do that, but it just didn't happen.
I'm just imagining you all in prom dresses and like a disco pumping bus, all seated quietly.
Yeah, a little. No, my date got up on the stripper pole.
Nice.
Yeah.
Hot.
But then I found out later that all of the people on that bus that were seniors got caught. And some of them had scholarships for football, and they all got revoked.
Wait, for reals? Mm-hmm. Wow.
Insane.
Yeah.
Also, another story. There's a girl that didn't.
Just peek into my lore.
No, there's a girl who didn't meet the graduation requirements, but she was close. So she was gonna graduate by the end of the summer, but she had to like retake a class, and she still showed up to graduation. She sat in the audience, but she bought a cap and gown so she could still take pictures with her friends. And I was like, amazing.
A couple years ago, we had a girl at our school,
Yeah.
student, obviously going to keep her nameless,
Yeah.
but the quote was funny, and I think she was good-spirited about it. She was a non-traditional senior, back for a fifth year, like a partial fifth year. I don't think she had to go the whole time, but had to finish a couple classes. And so then she graduated the next year, and she was included in the yearbook that year. And for her senior year quote, she goes, "I don't always graduate, but..."
Wait, that was really funny.
No, listen. She had a lot of life going on.
Yeah.
She was, I think, at least working part-time at that point, right? Like, I don't think she'd had like a normal school experience in general. And, life is, this is her Isle of Man. You never know where life's going to take you. But, I mean, just the wordplay. I was like, Queen, you learned something here. You learned something.
Good job. Okay. So, James decides to become a farmer. Upon
Sorry, Mo could not physically be closer to me right now if they tried.
Good.
So go ahead. I'm seated like I'm on a plane, just like, no, I'm just gonna suck everything in.
She does that. So James has plans to become a farmer. They're gonna move to Doarlish Cashen. Doarlish Cashen needs some renovations though, so they live in like a cottage, I think, in one of the nearby villages, while there are renovations happening that James really heads up. During World War I, the British government had prisoner of war and alien internment camps on the Isle of Man, like you mentioned. Many of these camps were very overcrowded. For example, one of the worst ones had a capacity of 5,000 men, but ended up housing 24.5 thousand men.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot. James leases some of his land to the government for 100 of those inmates to work.
Hell yeah, we're back in the money-making business.
Back in the money. And some of these men also helped him with the home renovations. During these renos, at some point, James hires some locals also to help from Peel, which is, I think, 8 or 9 miles away. So it's not close necessarily. Right. One of the renos I believe that these locals helped him with were applying matchboarding or wooden boarding to cover the stone walls.
Okay.
And in doing this, it creates kind of a gap between the wooden walls and the stone walls, which will become important later. But that's there.
Because they're going to put skeletons there, right?
Sure.
I'm just prepared.
Grant has the worst impression of the stories I tell. I want to remind you about this moment at the end, and you're gonna think you're a fool
because you owe it. And then they found 18 severed fingers, and it's like, ooh, let me talk to you about my little pupfish that live in a little hole in the desert. And you're like, and her body was hacked.
Never found.
It's that TikTok. Her arms were cut off. Her legs were cut off. Her tongue was cut out.
Yes, correct.
Okay, hold on. So, they are renovating this house.
Yes.
And there's a stone outer wall and a wooden inner wall.
Yes.
And there's a little bit of air pocket in between.
Cavity.
Which has to be pretty okay for installation purposes, right? Yeah. Cool.
Also, this house has been standing theoretically for hundreds and hundreds of years.
Right.
The house is fine. So he hires some locals to help with that job. It's a multiple day job, and since Doarlish Cashen was 8 to 9 miles from Peel, the plan was for these workers to spend the night. They had brought all of their stuff, and James prepared a room for them and everything. However, The locals refused to stay the night on account that the men kept hearing strange noises and had a very strong intuition to leave. And so they walked back to Peel, like giving an excuse that like, oh, we have some jobs in Peel to like work on like overnight.
Are these the prisoners?
No, these are locals.
Oh, okay. I was like, I'd rather be in prison than stay at this house.
Yeah, that would be funny. So once all of the renos are done, the family moves into the house September of 1917. Shortly after, in 1918, Margaret gives birth to a daughter.
Okay.
Voirrey. Voirrey. Yeah, Voirrey. It's Voirrey, and everyone pronounces it differently. I believe it's Voirrey. In 1920, Elsie moves to Liverpool. She marries and moves away. In 1926, 6 years later, the farm's doing well. It's being managed by their eldest son, Gilbert. There's high profits at this point from the farm with all of their livestock, and the high profits are also indicated by James's membership of the Masonic Lodge at Peel called Glenfaba Lodge. Yeah, well, I think it was called...
The next time we're drunk. Glenfaba Lodge.
Glenfaba Lodge, yeah. And then you can kind of see when the farm's profits start to decrease because James's membership at the lodge would lapse, and the main reason the lodge would lapse membership is because of unpaid fees.
Yeah, World War II ends. They don't have all that free labor.
So this is Doarlish Cashen.
Okay. I mean...
in the 1930s.
If I were to see it, I'd be like, it's old, but would have then no idea to figure out how old it was.
Yeah, it looks nice.
It's cute. It's built into the hill a little bit.
Yeah.
It's actually very charming. Mm-hmm. Could use a few trees around it, but that might be my American suburbs.
I think that's also because we're on an isle. There's a lot of wind. Okay. In 1928, Gilbert, I think, gets sick of it and moves away.
28? He was here for 10 years and he was like, I know I've done years of renovations, but I think we gotta bounce.
Yeah, Gilbert. Well, I don't think
Gilbert, the child.
The child.
Oh, yeah.
He moves out and goes to Edmonton. I'm not 100% sure about what happens to him after that. It seems like he got some kind of work in Edmonton and then ends up, I think, dying 10 years later.
Edmonton, Canada?
No, it's somewhere in the UK.
Okay.
I don't know. But that's the last we're really going to see of Gilbert.
That's the middle child.
That's the middle child.
Classic story. The middle child gets erased. I'm just naming it now for everybody.
He also dies, so... Okay. Literally he was erased. So that's fine. By the 1930s, Margaret and James don't have much contact with the two older children.
Okay.
So there are other stories about this house, mainly from before the Irvings were there, from a book called A Manx Scrapbook, published in 1929 by Walter Gill. And these are quotes. This is a story about some men that were digging in the area. Quote, some men digging here many years ago unearthed a flat stone covering a funerary urn which contained black ashes. They buried it in the hedge bank. A long time afterwards, and not extremely long ago, a young man hunting rabbits with his dog, parentheses, Paddy, whose name in the interest of historic accuracy shall be placed on record, and parentheses, thought he saw a rabbit bolt into the hedge.
What the fuck?
I know.
This dog deserves some credit.
Paddy. Refer to him by his name.
Government name.
Yeah. He began pulling away the stones and soil, the person, and while doing so, he felt something invisible pushing him back. When this happened a second time, a sudden fear took him, and he ran down the hillside till he reached his home. A white stone in the hedge still marks the spot where the urn was buried. So there's an urn, some sus shit happened. Another quote about a man who was walking from Dalby to Peel, so he kind of has to cross through where Doarlish Cashen is. A man who is sometimes given to drinking, but he was sober enough that night, for the public houses were closed before he started from Dalby.
Great telling a story.
Yeah, I was basically sober. I mean, I forgot the middle part of the story, but... So on his way back, he was followed from Shen Valley to near Dalby, a distance of 3 miles, by a ghost, which kept singing hymns and exhorting him to lead a better life. Ooh. As he passed Ballahutcheon on the outskirts of Dalby, the invisible one tried to push him up the steps leading towards the house, but he resisted and was then allowed to go home without further molestation.
I'm sorry, that's a terrifying story.
Yeah.
And how is he not running?
I don't know.
Okay.
This is the last story. A shoemaker in Peel, it's very short, recalled rumors of a, quote, strange animal that haunted the house. That's the end of that story. So...
Animal?
Yeah.
Okay.
House has weird vibes.
Yeah.
And specifically, we're going to talk about the vibes. The local people of the Isle of Man are called Manx, M-A-N-X, originating from the isle and are part of the Gaelic ethno-linguistic group.
Oh, cool.
Self-5 for getting that right on the page.
So clearly not part of the aristocracy.
Yep. So many of the Manx people are poor farmers, and so they didn't necessarily, and they're also somewhat like, what's it called when a group is like really doesn't want to allow in like
they're really
outsiders?
insular.
They're really insular. Also, it's like a smallish community. They didn't really want to include the Irvings because they like did come from money, and so they already don't fit in, and the locals thought of them as aloof. And it's also probably doesn't help that they're like miles away from the nearest village.
Doesn't help that they're aloof.
Yeah, that they're actually aloof. And here's another quote: the Manx like culture is kind of embedded, as a lot of Gaelic cultures are, in like folklore. And so this is a quote: "The island is indeed rich in folklore, and I recall from my youth a very superstitious place. The woman next door to my family home always slept with 2 crossed knives under her pillow to ward off evil."
Okay.
Yeah, so they're...
Oh, right. So super chill area of this island.
It seems like they're all like... I don't know. We don't see a lot of the Manx people.
Okay, sorry, but like as a history teacher, like there is something cool about places that are old and its inhabitants are aware as to how old it is.
Yeah.
You know? Like there's these stories during Alexander the Great's conquest of like the Eastern Mediterranean area where he conquered communities who like were comfortable but also convinced in like the ancientness of their civilizations already, that they had stories of kings that lived like 10,000 years and stuff like that. And obviously that's like not true, but like they knew they were in, I mean, by the time Alexander the Great rolls through Egypt, the pyramids of Giza are already like ancient, essentially.
No, Giza, sorry. I'm so used to hearing Gaza on the news. I was like, Giza's not right. My bad. Watch too much CNN. With that, I'm going to refill my drink.
No, it's fine. I just love the, like, Grant got that geography word wrong. I will help him right now. Pyramid of Giza.
As soon as I said that, I was like, no, my...
No, okay, hold on. It's the Pyramid of Giza thing.
Yeah.
Pyramid of Gizas.
Yes.
Are...
Pyramids of Giza?
What?
You said Pyramid of Gizas.
Yep, it's just one Giza, but it's multiple pyramids. The Pyramid of Giza... The pyramids of Giza. And this part should not stay at this point. I'm gonna say this part out loud, and then I'm gonna talk to you. Okay. During Queen Cleopatra's reign, she was closer to the opening of the first Pizza Hut than she was the building of the pyramids. That's how ancient they were. And obviously Cleopatra, Alexander the Great, not the same time period. They're separated by a couple hundred years.
But still, like, in our heads, we think about it.
Right, exactly. But they are already ancient by that point. That is what I was trying to say. Pizza Hut. Oh, also, this is actually kind of crazy, too. Those of you who are listening on your computer right now or close to it, open up a Google Tabs. Go to Google Maps. Look at the Pyramids of Giza, the Great Pyramid of Giza, and go to Street View. Very close to the Pyramid of Giza, there's a Pizza Hut. Go to Street View, and it should give you views of what that Pizza Hut's second floor balcony looks like. And it has one of the best undisturbed views of the pyramids. So you can get your Canadian bacon stuffed crust cheese pizza and look at the pyramids on the second floor of the Pizza Hut in Cairo.
I love that.
See, this is what makes history interesting. It's all just like gossip and travel tips. Anyways.
That's real. We're going to look at some pictures of the family. I don't actually think this is the father. I think this is someone that we'll meet later, this man. This is the mother.
Well, this looks like a rowdy crew.
Yeah,
This looks like a group that absolutely throws a party.
Well, we're going to talk about these pictures later. These pictures are published in an article, and the family is actually very upset that these pictures get published.
Friends, this photo's going to be right here. They already look haunted,
They
in
look
my
morose.
opinion. Yes.
That's what they said. Like, their complaint about these pictures being being published is that they're like, why did you pick those pictures? We look so sad.
They look sad and haunted by a ghost who knows what they did last summer.
Yeah, so this is Margaret, and then that's Voirrey.
So mom, youngest daughter.
Yes, at this point in this picture, I think she's probably closer to like 16, 17. She's not. So when this whole story starts, she's 13. And then this is the mom again. I just love this glamour shot. Like,
yeah.
She's serving.
She really is. Love the pearls.
Yeah.
Honestly, totally fine with also like the movement of that dress.
Yeah.
Her daughter in the door frame behind her looks like she's plotting her murder.
I'm obsessed with like if you're a camera nerd like me, I'm obsessed with like the field of vision or focus on these cameras, because these are like old as shit cameras, but you can tell like the f-stop is clearly like really low, which means like your area of focus is really short, and so everything before and after that is going to be really blurry, and it's just like really cool to see that.
I didn't follow most of that, but I think I understood what you were saying.
Okay, so we're gonna shift away from the Irvings for a quick
So
second.
we're gonna leave them on the Isle of Man.
We're gonna leave them on the Isle of Man.
With the Manx who do not like them.
The Manx who are like, you're weird.
Okay.
Anyway. So Harry Price. Does that name ring any bells? Okay, good. Harry Price was born in 1881, also in the UK. In 1889, Price saw his first performance by a stage magician. Is this sounding like someone?
Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and Harry Houdini.
Price began an amateur conjurer and began as an amateur conjurer and started collecting books on magic. When he was 15, he and his friends got permission to spend the night at an old haunted manor house where they experienced disembodied footsteps, and they tried to photograph a ghost, but it didn't work because Price loaded too much flash powder into his camera.
That's, of course, the only reason why it didn't work.
Mm-hmm. Duh. After school, Price becomes a journalist. In 1908, he marries a wealthy heiress, Constance Mary Knight.
Good for him.
Yeah. And this is a quote. He then settled down to become what all of us wish we could be, an independently wealthy ghost hunter.
Wait, that really is your dream.
That's a fucking amazing.
I also love how he's like, independently wealthy, I married it.
Yeah. He's like, I actually don't need to be a journalist. I can pursue my hobbies, Casey.
Funny, I don't remember seeing that part of Sondheim's musical Company about all the advantages of marriage.
So he began a career as the most famous ghost investigator in Britain. In 1920, Price joined the Society for Cyclical Research. Do you remember that?
The Cycle for Cyclical Research. That's like
Society,
to research like ghosts.
Mediums.
Yeah.
That's kind of where Houdini would like take the people that were suspected of being fraudulent mediums
and
to like
prove.
see if there's all this equipment and stuff to see what they were actually doing. And so that's a version of that. And this one's called the SPR. In addition to investigating haunted houses, he, like Houdini, spent a good deal of his time using his background knowledge of stage magic to investigate spiritualist mediums. He also was like, these damn frauds, but also, is it real?
These damn frauds, but what if they aren't frauds? How weird would that be? Let's dedicate
crazy.
my life to this.
Let's open a lab to investigate
Shut up,
this.
do they open a lab?
Oh, yeah.
Fun.
Yeah. So he debunked a lot of fraudulent mediums and psychics, but the difference between Harry Price and Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is that Price is more of the middle ground. He uses his knowledge to disprove frauds, but he's more agnostic than Houdini was in spiritualism. So, if you will, he was playing devil's advocate.
Famous for his lack of advocates.
Yes,
it's a good saying. It's
It
a
is.
funny
No, it's
saying.
good.
I told someone the other day, and that's what really Anne's my Hathaway. And they got on the ground for a second because it caught them off guard so much that they like had to catch their breath. You don't expect it, and you get it right away.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's fun.
I love it. So famous for his lack of advocates, much like Harry Price, also had a lack of advocates.
I love that you wrote that into your notes.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Go ahead.
So because Price played so much in the middle ground, he's a member of the SPR and the London Spiritualist Alliance, which has Sir Arthur Conan Doyle as one of the like big members. So the Society for Cyclical Research, who is suspicious of mediums and like wants to disprove them, was suspicious of Price's connection to the London Spiritualist Alliance because they questioned his impartiality.
Literally a double agent situation.
In investigations. And then the LSA thought him an arch skeptic intent on refusing all claims. So he can't win. He's just like, I don't know what to believe, and I'm doing everything in my damn power to figure out what's right.
He is the bisexual of spiritualism,
and
neither
like,
side believes.
Our dear...
Listen, speaking from lived experience, don't expect bisexuals to pick a side.
Don't. So, our dear friend, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, is very public in laying into Price by saying he had, quote, anti-spiritualistic articles that he had published, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle tried to get him kicked out of the LSA. So, that was going to be one of my questions for you, and apparently I didn't ask it, so it's fine. Regardless of his career as a ghost hunter, he investigated, regardless, comma, during his career as a ghost hunter, he investigated haunted houses, seances, poltergeists, witchcraft, black magic, firewalking, fraudulent mediums, and he published a lot of books. Do you remember how many books Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle published, like, constantly?
They were just always dissing each other.
Yeah.
They were the original Kendrick and Drake.
Yeah, and I think this was Harry Price, but he does have a nemesis equivalency to like Houdini and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, but like he's not writing books at them.
It's actually really good for the soul to have a nemesis, to have a space where you can channel that energy to.
Exactly.
How many books does he write?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I just know he wrote some. Through his research, he never really denies that mediums are real. But he uncovered so many frauds that, quote from him, the proportion of genuine to fake was a small one. By 1932, Price was like sick of it. This is a quote from a book that he wrote called Confessions of a Ghost Hunter, and it was published in 1936.
What a great title.
Right. This quote, however, was from 1932. He says, this is a quote from someone that interviewed Price in 1932. Sorry, I'm going to say all this again. This is a quote from the book I read about the book he wrote.
Little inception here.
Quote, Price had also become disillusioned with what he saw as the public's credulity, suspecting that they preferred to believe in the fantastic despite evidence to the contrary. This is a quote from Price. So many people prefer the bunk to the debunk. As he is often quoted saying. Therefore, at this stage in his career, Price had become somewhat disenchanted. Another quote from him. When one contemplated the almost weekly exposure of some wretched medium, 2 years ago I tried hard to give up the laboratory and failed, but I think I must get out of it somehow now. The whole subject is not worth the money, energy, and time that I put into it.
Listen, am I making bank disproving all these mediums? Yeah, Houdini and I, huge parties. Yeah. But, like, is it good for my soul?
My wife is rich.
Exactly.
I could just be vacationing.
Someone asked me the other day, so, like, what are you going to do with your summer vacation now that it's coming up? And it's so hard to be, like, to say in an eloquent, exciting way. Yeah. Like, charcuterie and Aperol spritzes. Like, babes, what do you think I was going to do with that
dairy and alcohol.
Yeah, thank you.
Obviously.
I'm 31.
I know how to have a good time.
Exactly.
So this is a quote from Price's book, Confessions of a Ghost Killer. Or Ghost Hunter. Quote, I have been asked to do some queer things during my 30 years investigation of the alleged supernormal. For example, when lecturing in Paris, I was invited to take up my perch on top of the Eiffel Tower and investigate a haunted kiosk where ivories and cheap jewelry and similar souvenirs, quote, simply vanished into thin air. And it was thought that the thief must be a psychic one. Again, a poor woman came to see me one day and stated that for 3 consecutive nights, she had dreamt that a near relative, recently buried, was not dead, but in a trance, and asked if I could...
Like buried alive?
Yeah. Could I procure for her an exhumation order to make some tests? Then there was the man who secured a quantity of peyote, and suggested that if I consumed enough of it, I could project my astral and record my experience.
I mean, yeah, if I get really high too, I bet I'd come up with some pretty insane stuff.
Project my astral?
I gotta stop doing that.
I gotta project
my
my
astral. I'm a public
astral.
school teacher. As a person who's been to the Eiffel Tower, the only thing that vanishes there is personal space, okay?
Yeah.
Not a lot of really great views.
Or
and
maybe
everyone
your
wants
cell
to
phone.
No, I came back with that, but mine's so broken.
Well, so Price is open and acknowledging all the weird shit people ask him to do.
Okay.
Because he's a ghost hunter. And he's like a famous ghost hunter at that. But Price does remember one request that stood out to him as an unusual one, even amongst all of his unusual requests. Because the contents of the request did not come from the group being directly affected by whatever was happening. And a lot of people are looking for fame. So the fact that it was a third party really intrigued him. There's a quote from before, the quote from before that I just read goes on to say, curious as these requests may appear, they are commonplace compared to the one I received in the winter of 1932 from a lady on the Isle of Man.
Oh.
This is the letter that was addressed to him. First of all, it was addressed to Dr. Peace or Price.
I don't know how to spell your name, but I know you're good.
Scientist, Cyclical Research Institute. I don't understand how the post system worked before we had like zip
I
codes.
had to send a email to the head of my department from my master's program to
Yeah.
get this waiver that I asked for.
Yeah.
And their name is Dr. So-and-so. Let's just say Dr. Smith. And I just wanted to say, like, hello, Dr. Smith. But I was like, is that too informal?
Yeah.
Do I do, Dear Dr. Smith?
Dear Dr. Smith.
So you know what I went with?
Dr. Smith.
Dear gentle reader.
To whom it may concern.
No, I didn't. I said, hello, Dr. Smith. I was like, let's roll the dice.
Yeah, that's fair. So this is the letter that was addressed to Harry Price. Dear Sir, I beg you to forgive me for presuming on your valuable time and attention. You gotta compliment them first.
I mean, also, like, I'm sorry, I'm such a, like, gross little
Yeah,
pig
but,
boy
like-
here writing for you, but...
But I feel sure you will be interested from a scientific point of view in what I tell you. Situated 4 or 5 miles from here in the heart of the country between Glen May and Dalby is a small farmhouse occupied by Mr. and Mrs. Irving and one daughter. Last September, they noticed a strange animal in the farmyard. Among the fowls, similar in appearance to a weasel. Sometime after that, they began to hear very loud thumping on the wood partitions. On hearing the knocking, Mr. Irving spoke, calling it to stop, and was so surprised on hearing it speak back.
No. No. What does it say?
Oh, we'll get into it. So Price reads that letter and he's like, yeah, I'm interested.
I'm interested in this.
But unfortunately, this is like 1932 and he's really busy with another big case at the time. So his investigation will come in a bit.
So he's like, keep living in the haunted weasel house,
Yeah.
and I'll get to you when I have a
I
moment.
think actually he doesn't visit right away. He sends one of the other people from
Assistants.
his lab,
Yeah.
someone that all of the assistants that he sends to research are people that are skeptics, right? And like well informed on the coming and goings of like spiritualism, right? So he sends Captain Harold Eggerton, Dennis. I will just be calling him Dennis from now on. Dennis is a well-known racing motorist and was described as very shrewd and not easily hoodwinked. Okay, so back to the Isle of Man.
Are our descriptions too simple? Engineer, teacher. Do we need to have
let's-
accomplished car enthusiast or whatever his
Dear
name
listener,
was?
I have an assignment.
What would be our 1930s descriptions?
Imagine we're Game of Thrones, we're sitting in a grand throne room. How would you introduce us? And it needs to have at least 3 commas.
You're reading the London Times. Your papa is reading out loud the article about our shenanigans.
Yes.
And our titles alone disqualify us from dinner that night. What does that mean?
yeah.
Bridgerton impacted me. But anyways, what would be our titles?
I need to know. 'Cause I don't.
Opinionated woman and flouncy man.
Loud woman.
Sounds like a great time to me.
I think we should
I'd say
rename
hold
our
my
podcast.
mimosa. Opinionated woman and flouncy man.
It's not bad.
WAL is such a good acronym. Anyway, so what happens
true.
with this enthusiastic racing enthusiast?
September 13th, 1931, at night, James and Margaret are in bed, and they start hearing a tap, tap, tap behind the wood panels. Remember that cavity between the stone and the wood?
I do remember that cavity.
Yeah, they do hear that coming from the wooden ceiling, though, in between the wooden ceiling and slate roof. I think there's an attic as well up
Sure.
there. So James hears this tapping, and he assumes it's mice. So he opens up the ceiling and doesn't find anything, but he does find an Indian ornament, like a small Indian wooden carving.
Indian Native American, Indian South Asian.
Indian South Asian.
Okay.
James recognizes it as one of his own,
Okay.
although he has no idea how it got to where it is in the ceiling/attic. But when they tried dropping the ornament like on the ground, it made the same sound that they had heard previously.
Okay. I mean, terrifying and haunting, but okay.
Another night, the tapping is louder, and it sounds as if something's running around through the house in the walls. They start hearing animal noises, barking, growling, hissing, like a cat spitting, you know. Whatever it was could move faster than the Irvings could process because they thought there was more than one because it was moving around so fast that they didn't think it was possible for it to be making
One thing
noise
moving
here
that
and
fast.
there
Oh,
that quickly.
No.
On October 20th, Voirrey and James caught a glimpse of some unusual creature, described, quote, small rat-like body with a long bushy tail, and tail being yellowish hue and the tail speckled with brown.
Why are people so opposed to burning things down? Like, that's what I want to know.
They don't have money.
I'm sure it's insured.
early 1900s?
Yeah, absolutely. Insurance has been around for a while. It's an old home. I'm sure it's insured to some degree. Just burn that whole thing down. Rebuild it right next to it. That's what they did in my mom's old home. Not for the insurance money, but to teach the local firefighters how to put out a house fire. I told you that story, right? Oh, I've told you that story. I talked to my mom one day on our annual Sunday call. I was like, so how are things? And, you know, we're chatting, and Mom's like, yeah, they burned down the home that I grew up in. And I'm like, what?
I'm sorry,
and my
what?
mom was like, yeah, well, I mean, like, the local fire department in this rural county where she grew up is all volunteer-based. And so they need, like, an ability to practice. And the old farmstead, no one was living in it anymore. And so she was like, yeah, so, like, earlier this week, like, your dad and I walked through, and I had, like, my moment and, like, grabbed any final memories and stuff.
Yeah.
And then they torched the place.
You were like,
And that's how utilitarian my mom is. She's like, listen, I'd rather them practice on a home that they're not using than a home later that someone is. And I was like, sure, but like, wasn't it really sad to see them set your childhood home on fire? And my mom said, yeah, I guess a little. And I was like, yeah, I think a lot, but whatever. Anyways, set your houses on fire.
ma'am.
I've told you that story.
No, you have not. I would not be reacting like this if I'd heard that story before. Okay.
The new home on the farmstead is gorgeous and has been gorgeous for years. They built it before they burned down the old one.
Oh, nice. Okay, so they're hearing some weird shit. They saw a weird animal.
And they're opposed to setting everything on fire.
Yeah, because they don't have the money to do anything. So by December, they're hearing identifiable words coming from the walls that sound like a child learning to speak. The family tried to quiz the entity by singing nursery rhymes, and before the week was over, they were hearing those nursery rhymes being repeated back to them.
No.
First of all, why are you doing nursery rhymes?
No.
That is nightmare
The
fuel.
most haunting thing you could say.
Ring around, like coming from your walls.
Like read the local, I don't know, like tax record
Paper,
or something. Yeah. Read the most banal shit out there.
So James Irving gives a brief explanation on how the entity first began to speak. This is a quote. The entity's first talk was something like "dama dama blum blum blum."
No.
Those were.
It gives me. Sorry, is this giving me Willy Wonka vibes? And I hate that kind of stuff too.
It's interpreted later that dama dama because I think that this was something he wrote down as to be like him putting words to what like a child gurgling sounds like or something like a baby.
Okay.
And then he goes on to say, then we heard a bark. I repeated the noises of various animals. Back like a shot came the same sound. I said the name of an animal. It then repeated what I said. This way, it learned to talk. In a few weeks' time, it was talking as fluently as I do.
What? Men will literally teach a haunting ghost how to speak before burning a house down.
This is another quote from James about it. Quote, it is quite obvious to me that it could not have learned that vocabulary from me in such a short time. It uses words which we never use in our house. I think it pretended to have learned talking.
Like, don't. Stop.
Yes.
The ghost baby's talking again. Like those kind of words? Those kind of words?
Yep. It uses words that we never use in our house. I think it pretended to have learned talking from us because had it just started talking without any pretense, 99 people out of 100 would have immediately left the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's still weird that it learned from
Correct.
you. Yeah.
The fact that it can learn is actually more terrifying, in my opinion.
Yeah. And so he's kind of comparing this entity to like a child learning how to speak because that's how children learn, by imitation.
Right.
But it's still like so upsetting that if it didn't know how to speak already, it learned that quickly.
Yeah.
Like within 6 weeks, it's speaking fluently. And then also if it is pretending to learn, the fuck?
Right.
Yeah. So this is a quote from him again. My wife is emphatic that it could talk long before it came into our life, and I agree, as in 6 weeks' time, it was possessed of a vocabulary as extensive as mine. And then another thing is that it started using Manx slang, which the family did not use because they're not Manx, and so they don't, I think they understand it, but they never use it in the house. Yeah. So it's learned to talk.
It already knew to talk. It's now pretending it's learning how to talk.
Yeah.
Which means it can plan, which means it's malicious, which means burn the house down.
I mean,
or at least take a hostage, go out to that mound back there, dig up one of those bodies, and be like, we will desecrate this place if you do not stop freaking us the fuck out. Like, I don't know, maybe it is the toxic masculinity in me, but I was like, what could violence not solve in this situation?
Yeah. We'll get to that in a little bit. So, like a kid, this thing was incessantly curious. It would be like, it would say to him, one more question, Jim, then I'll let you sleep.
No.
Like at night.
No.
So a lot of people, including some of the family, believe that the entity was present before 1931 when it first made itself known, because it seemed to recognize people that had been in the house before. Like, at some point, the oldest sister comes back, and it recognizes her, and she left the house, like, almost immediately after they moved in.
Yeah.
So she, like, was never there. And this is a quote from a journalist or something. However, if one accepts the existence of the entity, one such explanation might be that the entity had the ability to read the minds, and thus the memories of the Irvings.
No.
No. At some point, I think the family probably got tired of like not knowing what to call it, so they started calling it Jack. Yeah, Jack, the talking thing in the wall.
More like jack shit. Get the fuck out of there.
So once it's learned to speak, towards the end of 1931 and beginning of 1932, it seemed as though Jack was trying to get them to leave the house. But they financially couldn't.
Because he's saying, leave.
What? We'll get there. Okay, so Jack would yell at them, threaten them, and scare them with satanic laughter. One night, when the husband and wife were trying to, like, you know, have their time, as husband and wife do, the entity started narrating everything James was doing and threatening to tell the whole town about it. And he's yelling. James had to physically leave the house before the entity would stop yelling, before Jack would stop yelling.
Like, it's terrifying, but that's also so funny.
It's so funny. One night, James and Margaret are talking in bed at night and not wanting Jack to hear their whispering to each other.
It's a ghost, babes. They're gonna hear you.
Yeah, so Jack says to Margaret, what in the name of God can this thing be? And the entity, Jack, shouts back just to prove it can hear, what in the name of God can this thing be?
No.
So James sits up in the darkness, and Jack shouts back, lie down, you devil.
Calm down, I can't touch you.
If I could, you'd be dead.
Exactly, yes. This ghost is going to set the house on fire with them in it on the second floor. It has 2 floors, I listen.
So James remembers at this point being afraid that whatever the thing was would somehow throw a knife at him. He, at some point, started throwing pebbles at the family. That's like while they're walking around the property and in the house.
You said there was 0 dark stuff in this story. You lied.
Just wait. Eventually, Jack informed them, quote, I am the ghost in the form of a weasel, and I shall haunt you. And he would repeat this all the time.
Did they ask follow-up questions but just here, or are you going to follow us to the next place?
We'll talk about it.
Okay.
So James would respond, because he said this all the time, James would respond to, quote, all right, you devil, haunt away. You have come to the right house and the right people.
What?
Because they can't move. They're stuck with it, and they're also...
Has he lost his knack for selling pianos? Use the gifts God gave you. The war's done. Go back out there. Speak your Yiddish.
So another thing about the Irving family is that although spiritualism is kind of taking the world by force, this family is very skeptic. Like they're at no point, I don't even know if they're skeptic. They're just so not involved in the scene of spiritualism that they're just what the fuck is in the wall? At no point are they it's a ghost, it's a spirit, it's some reincarnation. They're I don't know what's in the wall.
What talking cognizant weasel,
Yeah.
which is actually maybe more terrifying than a ghost, is haunting us right now.
Yeah,
They keep thinking they're going to catch it and skin it or something.
It's hard to say. I think what they wanted to do was find a way to kick it out of the thing. There's a point where
I've not heard them mention a priest, which I think is funny.
Yeah. At one point, Voirrey and James see the weasel, catch a glimpse of it, and that's how they come up with the description. But James does have a gun, and I think there's something where he doesn't want to kill something just for the sake of killing it.
No.
I don't know, whatever.
So, like, the Irvings feel like kind of like legitimately good people.
Yeah. Yeah, they do.
Okay.
Throughout the whole thing, you're never gonna like be like, yeah. They seem like
what a champ for this whole situation.
They seem like a solid group
Wild.
of people. Okay, so Jack would often pelt James with small stones in the back of the head, neck, shoulders, back, hips, and then James would hear the ghost satanically laugh. He said he wanted, quote, he wanted to scare us, and then, quote, he succeeded in scaring Voirrey. He had a terrible voice, and he would say, I am the ghost in the form of weasel. I shall haunt you with weird noises and clanking chains. And he would make metallic sounds, theoretically by knocking something metallic against another metallic thing. But imagine hearing that from a wall, and Voirrey went pale with fear and was, like, terrified. One day, very early on, after Jack started all of this, James and Voirrey were resting in their respective bedrooms. Margaret was not home, when suddenly there was a very loud scream. Jack had gotten into some rat poisoning that James had placed on bread, hoping to catch Jack. But Jack didn't die. He just was like in agony from consuming the rat poison, and he continued to scream for 20 minutes.
We're talking about the feral ferret ghost.
Yes.
Poisoned.
Yes. And he, like, for 20 minutes, and then it stopped suddenly. And so, in the quote from James, he describes the volume of the screaming, quote, I can only liken them in volume to the screams, this is so specific, the screams of a pig when having a horseshoe nail put through the tip of its snout, parentheses, without, of course, parentheses, an anesthetic.
What? What's he doing to pigs on his farm, too?
Why do you know what that sounds like?
Exactly.
Why is it so specific? There's no anesthetic. And that's really fucking loud, my dude. I think. Actually, wow. I don't know.
So he sets out rat poison, thinking like Jack's gonna eat it.
Yeah.
And then he's smart enough to be a satanic ferret ghost.
Yeah.
But he's not smart enough to be like, this is poison?
Yeah. I guess. I don't know. So him and Voirrey look for a dead body in the walls and the ceiling and the attic, but they don't find anything. But they don't hear from Jack again for a couple days. So they're like, is he dead? But then the entity starts talking again. Jack starts talking again.
I bet his first thing is like, thought you killed me, huh? We just stop swearing so much. But
so Jack seems fascinated with Voirrey, and yeah, since it's so aggressive, though, the Irvings, and she's 13 still at this point, the Irvings decided to move her bed into their room to protect her a little bit. The entire time, though, that they were disassembling her bed, moving it, and reassembling it, Jack threw a fit and then screamed, I'll follow her wherever you move her. Yeah. The family also found holes in the walls that they assumed to be used by the entity to move from place to place. So James... or to like spy on them. So James would board them up. But not long after, the holes would be recreated, and then everyone in the home could hear the scratching of the holes being reformed.
The holes?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Burn it down with fire.
Another night.
There's a thing, I don't know if this is a story I should share for Patreon instead. It is. I'm going to save it for later. I'm putting it into notes so we don't forget.
Don't scroll around because I had intended to show this later. But you can see one of the like really small holes right there. This is above the fireplace on the mantle where they think he was looking through.
Also, that's James, right?
No, this is someone that we'll meet later.
I was saying, this is like the most average looking man in the world.
I think that's Dennis, maybe. I'm not sure.
So, okay, it's kind of a really long... It's tiny, but it's a long slit for a ferret.
Yeah. So, another night...
I'm like gripped by the story. I want you to know, by the way.
Good. So... Another night when the entire family is going to bed, James had barricaded the door with dressers and chairs from the inside to like keep it, to keep it from opening. I assume it opened inwards.
Sure.
And then the top of the door began to bulge inward, and the entity said, "I'm coming in."
All folksy.
Yeah, and then a pot of ointment like crashed onto the bed. I don't know how that was related, but although the Irvings were not believers in spiritualism, they realized at some point that they might be dealing with something supernatural.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in realizing this, they also realized that their efforts to keep Jack out of the home were probably futile and would fail because it's either like attached to the home or attached to one of them or something like that. So they're like, okay, we can't move. This thing's not going anywhere. Let's try and keep him from being so antagonistic.
Okay, let's make him happy.
Yeah,
we have a roommate.
Let's have a truce. So they begin to form a truce, leaving out food for him, like chocolate, bananas, and potato pie and bacon, which he would eat. He would never eat the fat of the bacon, though, interestingly.
Gotta watch his figure. He has a lot of like sneaking around he has to do.
Yeah. If he gets too big, he can't sneak through those walls anymore. So in return, Jeff started to kill rabbits for them and leave them on the doorstep, which ended up actually being helpful because the family needed help like getting food, and so they got that. At this point, the farm isn't doing well. I think,
the ferret starts killing rabbits for them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think the farm's not doing super well. Their livestock like doesn't have great numbers, and so he's not a member of the Masonic Lodge.
Right. Can't afford those dues. I want you to know, for like at least the first 20 minutes of this episode, I thought the big reveal was that it was a parrot. That someone brought a parrot to the island and it just like learned words. But okay, I hate this. Continue.
So the family was able to eat the rabbits for their own food, and then they were also able to sell any of the extras in the town for like 2 to 7 pence each. So it was also helping with like revenue of the house. And Jack would also chase rats out of the house.
Okay.
And so he was like useful. In early 1932, Jack heard Mr. Irving talking to 2 boys who were hunting for rabbits on his property, and James was scared that like the kids would like harm the property in some way, and so he was like asking them to leave. But then he asked who they were, and one of the boys said that his last name was Lowy, which James recognized, and he was like, "Is your father's name Jeff Lowy?" And it was, and whatever, and so. Jack hears this conversation and then says later, quote, "I don't like the name Jack. Call me Jeff."
Oh.
Spelled G-E-F.
I knew it. As soon as you put a finger up, I go, grossly, right?
Grossly, yeah. G-E-F.
Wait. G-E-F?
G-E-F.
Not G-E-O-F-F?
Nope. G-E-F.
Which I can make my peace with, but G-E-F? It's like the GIF debate, which is, there's only one side.
And there's actually a response to that, I think, early on, that it's like, because he has like a child, like, they kind of were equating him to a child, that he was spelling things phonetically. Yeah.
So Jack, the evil ghost ferret,
yes,
overhears a conversation with James.
Yes.
And a man named, and a kid named Jack. Whose
father's name was Jeff.
Okay. Whose father's name was Jeff, but the kid's name was...
We don't know. I don't know.
And Jack, the ghost
hears
ferret...
the name Jeff and is
was
like,
I want that one more.
Yeah.
An insane decision to come to.
But also so funny. Because at this point, they're probably just forming their bond, right?
Yeah.
Just like starting to be less like aggressive towards each other. And he's like, actually...
What's that
Call
movie where her husband dies and then they sensually make pottery together, her and his ghost? It's from the 90s. You know what I'm talking about, right?
I do. I don't know the name of it.
Huge vibes there. Didn't think I was
Feels
gonna...
like, what's it?
It's a Diane Keaton movie, I think. Didn't expect Diane Keaton was going to involve in this, but here we are.
There's another one that's like Diary of a Time Traveler or something like that.
Time Traveler's Wife.
Yes, that feels like that. Jeff also starts telling them a little bit more about his past, I guess. He claims he was born 80 years prior in Delhi, India, on June 7th, 1852, which means he's a hashtag Gemini.
In Delhi, India in 1852.
Yeah, so he's... Okay. Yeah, he's a ghost. And he claims that he had been chased and shot at by natives. I don't know what that means. Anytime he had been asked, how did you get here from India, he would give a different story.
Okay.
Just for funsies.
So compulsive liar.
Yeah, so more hijinks. This is just a list of all the crazy ass shit Jeff did. Jeff would be able to recount the family members' activities throughout the day, even if they were in town. Like, if James went to town to buy certain things, talk to certain people, he ordered a beer, comes home, Jeff would be like, you talked to this person, you bought certain things, and you ordered a beer, and then you came home. And, like, right as you walk in the door. So there's, like, no way for... Yeah, it was crazy. Another thing he would do, he would seemingly be able to observe someone, like, James doing farm work outside while talking to Margaret. So Margaret would be like, I wonder where James is. And Jeff would be like, oh, he's out in that field doing this.
So he could focus on two things at once,
Apparently.
including when things were away.
And this is a 70-acre farm, so it's not like he can just like
look outside
look
the
out
window.
the window. Yeah. One time they had a goat which kept wandering away, so they had put like a weight or something on its back to keep it from wandering too far. But the weight fell off and was lost, but Jeff was able to tell them exactly where it was. Yeah.
Oh, but Jeff's their friend now at this point.
Yeah, they're getting there. However, James starts to feel fondly for Jeff. His nickname for Jeff was his Nibs.
Hey, Nibs.
This is literally a dad that doesn't want the pet.
Dear Nibs, I had a really weird day at work. You saw it. Do you think Margaret's mad at me? What the? I guess this is a man who made peace with a possessed ferret from India living in his home in between Ireland and Wales. So I guess like his barometer for like, oh, that's weird, is like maybe higher. It seems to be a man of peace.
Yeah, he's just like, we're here.
I mean, to start talking to it and nicknaming it, Nibs is now his religion.
Yeah.
He's talking to the prophet Nibs.
And James also starts keeping a very detailed diary of everything that happens with Jeff.
Okay.
And that's how we know
Nibs.
so much about this, and this happened in the early 1900s.
Okay.
He kept a very detailed journal. He said to many people that he would leave, he wanted to leave, or rather not die on the Isle of Man.
Nibs didn't want to die on the Isle of Man?
No, James.
Okay.
He was like, I don't want to stay here for the rest of my life, is
Right.
what he's saying, because he's not a Manx man.
Sure.
But felt he couldn't leave because, quote, what would happen to his lordship?
Nibs? What I want to know is what the wife's opinion is in all of this. Who's like, well, I mean, like, you and I got married. So I kind of thought we would treasure and cherish to have and to hold. But no, I'm glad that your Indian ghost ferret gets you. Sorry I don't have psychic vision. But I gave you 3 beautiful children in the best years of my life, damn it, James. I don't know why I love making up family drama for families I have never met.
I love it.
But I think I'm talented at it.
I think you are too.
Thanks.
Someone at some point brought up an offer that they had seen that another person, theoretically like a ghost hunter or investigator or something, was offering £3,000 for a genuinely haunted house.
So they could bankroll their life forever.
But the family worried that Jeff would not be looked after.
Is it 5 years of my salary? Of course it is. But what if it pisses off Nibs? Good luck giving him lean bacon to make him feel better about this whole situation.
So, remember those metallic noises I was telling you about?
Yes.
The chains? Turns out that he would steal spoons to make those noises. And at one point in James's journal entry, he said, quote, Jeff has seemed to clank chains, which they afterward discovered to be done with spoons he had taken. Parentheses, no big spoons left now.
So even after they're friends, he's like, this is kind of funny though. Choo. If you're kind of lost into the story, you're not alone. Like, I'm so confused by these characters. Not who they are, but like who they are, you know?
Yes, why they are. So townspeople, the local people of the island, would venture to Doarlish Cashen as dares, because obviously they had been hearing about this.
Right.
It's like that thing, that like stereotype of the teenagers going to the haunted house.
The way it could have been so many dead warriors, and instead it's a fairy.
Yeah. It could be like a Norse god or something.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the people would come up to the house, much to the family's dismay. Many stories of property damage were like occurred around this time. James was like, has a lot of quotes saying that he was like not happy with the attention that they were getting from the townspeople. He had to like, there was one time that people were crawling on their roof and he had to like tell them like, if you don't get out, like now I'm getting my shotgun.
Right.
Like that kind of stuff.
Leave me and Nibs and the rest of my family alone.
And Margaret. Is that her name?
I'm here.
Here's some more stuff Jeff would say, namely to James. This just makes it so much funnier that James like loves Jeff or like is fond of Jeff. Jeff one time would shout to James, quote, "Read it out, you fat-headed gnome," to tell him to read him the paper. James, quote,
Imagine having clairvoyant vision, but you can't read a paper open in a room.
there are stories of him being able to read the paper from a great distance. I think at some point it was just like, read it to me.
I don't want to read.
I don't want to read. James is quoted shortly after with one of the visitors that would come to like see or listen to Jeff or whatever, saying, "Surely I don't look like a gnome." Jeff. So James has a nickname for Jeff, his nibs. Jeff nicknamed James Potts.
Oh, that's cute. Pots and nibs.
Yeah, derived from a cartoon of one of the newspapers that they would read together. Jeff compared James's hair to the Dickinson character Dick Swiveller. I looked up a picture, didn't provide any context.
Christ, what a name.
Dick Swiveller. Jeff also made up a lot of childish rhymes, one of which he juxtaposed Jim with the Manx word for toilet, taiveg, the Manx word for outdoor toilet specifically. Jeff, however, was very protective of Voirrey, who was getting really ostracized at school.
Sure.
Already an outcast.
For her evil ghost ferret.
Yeah, because at this point she's probably like 14, 15, right? She's already an outcast because she's not some of the local population. They came from some money, and they're not still in that poorer class of farmers, right? And she lived far away from everyone. So even if she wanted to have like an after school time with people, she couldn't really. They called her uncanny and weird, and often, so newspapers started referring to this whole situation as the Dalby Spook, because the city near them is Dalby.
Sure.
And so her classmates started calling her the Dalby Spook.
Yeah. I mean, really clever nickname, but that's still really mean.
Yeah. V was also known to have an affinity for animals. One of the people that would come to like investigate Jeff recalled that she was leaving the house quite often to go bottle feed a lamb that's parents has died. Schoolmates started calling her Goatie because she always smelled like goats. Jeff told James, "If anyone speaks to her or touches her, I shall attack them."
I would like to see it.
Do it.
Speaks to her? Or speaks ill of her?
I think he meant speaks ill of her.
Okay.
Yeah. The worst part about having Jeff around was his laughter. Same.
Oh. Is that to me or to you or to us?
Oh, to me. Yeah, I mean, probably is. I think James is quoted saying he can laugh like a demented person. He would often do this late into the night for no apparent reason. Also same, though.
I am raccoon.
So aside from the laughing, he was also known to keep them up late into the night, constantly asking questions, singing. One very specific time, he listed in rapid succession 30 to 40 ailments, such as rheumatoid arthritis, gouty phlebitis, elephantiasis, melanoma sarcoma, Barbados leg.
All of those were real except the last one. He was testing them.
Yeah. Jeff also referred to himself as the 8th wonder of the world.
Nice.
One time James was reading the Bible. To preface this, James grew up religious and now doesn't really attend church.
Sure.
But Jeff said, quote, "Look at the pious old atheist reading the Bible and he'll be swearing in a minute."
I mean, what a read.
I know.
Jeff sounds gay.
A little. He's mean. That's what we love about him. Jeff would I already mentioned that. They would play something called the penny game with Jeff, where they would flip a penny and he would correctly guess, like 100% of the time, which face was landing up.
Okay.
Except one time when these two people that he didn't like came over and he intentionally incorrectly guessed every time.
Didn't want to perform for him?
Yeah, it wasn't even like he just wasn't looking. He was like still doing it, but opposite. So if it landed heads, he would say tails consistently until James reprimanded him. And then he was like,
Nibs, do it right or don't do it at all.
Yeah. And then he did it right. Jeff really didn't like one of the women. Her name was Miss Gamble. And when he was told by Irving that she was leaving the area soon and asked if Jeff had anything to say to Miss Gamble, I think at this point being like, "Do you want to say sorry?" Jeff said, "Yes. Tell her, I hope the propeller drops off."
Oh, she gets lost at sea? I hope the propeller gets lost. It's such a cool burn, too.
Right? So, the townspeople and spiritualists have a lot of theories.
Sure.
What are your theories?
I don't know, but fire is a cure. I truly am lost though.
Okay. There are a lot of theories. The first and most prominent theory to come to everyone's mind is that they're doing it for money.
Sure.
That they want to get people to pay to visit
I always
Jeff.
forget they could be in on it.
Yes. However, they never got any money from this. Even when newspapers interviewed them, James never asked for anything from it.
Okay.
And the family's pretty obviously quite poor at certain points. We see some of that later. And he never really gets any money from the people that come to stay at the house. I think one time one of the investigators pays him for board, and then there's a few other times where people would bring tea and food. But
Sure.
that's ostensibly it.
Okay.
So another theory, or the townspeople in general obviously know about all of this. They know it's probably not for money because obviously the Irving family would not be at that house anymore.
Right.
Yeah. And when one of the investigators spent a lot of time in some of the towns interviewing people, talking to them and then casually bringing up the Dalby spook, this person said, quote, "The general attitude is of outward skepticism, but inward nervousness. There is something
Accurate.
there, but how can an animal talk? People in the village won't go near that place. No one will go there at night."
Yeah.
One of the townspeople's theories is that Voirrey and Margaret are psychic or spiritualist or something. Many reports of Margaret, especially, are apparently she had very dark eyes.
Okay.
And she's both her and Voirrey are more silent. They're not super outgoing.
Yeah, Jeff and James are gabbing up a storm over there.
They're outgoing. I think a lot of the investigators reported that James tended to dominate conversation. And so they would talk and everyone regarded them as pleasant people, but they weren't super outgoing. And so I think that combined with Margaret's kind of uncanny appearance, she had dark hair and really, really dark eyes,
Right.
led them to believe that she was maybe a psychic. In addition to that, Margaret had a very acute intuition. She could tell, she would send James out when they knew a visitor was coming, but they don't know when. She would know when they were close to the house and send James out to go walk them the rest of the way.
Okay.
So the theory is that maybe Jeff is being unconsciously produced by one of them as a spirit. One spiritist believed that he is an earthbound spirit drawing energy from the family, which is terrifying. Voirrey and the other theory the townspeople had is that Voirrey and the mother wanted to trick James into leaving the house by scaring him, and
instead he just becomes best friends with them.
Yeah, so they wanted to trick him by scaring him out because the theory is that they used to live an affluent lifestyle, and so they wanted to go back to London. But by that same token, Voirrey had been born on the Isle, so why
Right.
would she want to leave? Also, this whole thing with Jeff lasted until I think the last known communication with Jeff was 1942.
Jesus Christ.
Why the fuck would they continue this that long if it clearly wasn't working?
It was 28 to 42.
Yeah.
Okay.
31 to 42.
Okay.
Almost 10 years. Or over 10 years. So a lot of people also thought that Jeff could be the spirit of someone who had died nearby.
Yeah.
Obviously. This is just a really long quote, but it's about someone who had died that they thought might be Jeff. As regards to Jeff's sometimes identification as a spirit, he made a possibly telling remark when Irving put to him that he was the spirit of Pierre Baum, a well-known and eccentric figure on the island during the 19th century. A radical freethinker and atheist with an unorthodox love life, Baum would have been regarded...
So gay.
Yeah. Baum would have been regarded by many in the religiously conservative society of the Isle of Man at the time as a sinful, godless man. When he died... he left large sums of money for charity on the island, with the stipulation that none could be used for any religious purpose.
Nice.
He was born in Marseille in 1797 to an anti-clerical family who moved to Naples when he was still young. Baum was a frequent visitor to England. By the late 1820s, he had become associated with the social reform movement in London. Around 1825, he settled in London, perhaps because of the political situation on the continent had become too hot for him, because of his involvement in radical politics. However, it is also believed that he was involved in some form of espionage, which may have been the source of his wealth.
Oh.
Because no one could figure out where he got his money from.
I love mysterious rich people.
I know. It sounds like this guy could be his own episode. Beginning in 1901, a series of events that became... Oh, so this is another part. Apparently, there's the Isle of Man at this point is known for like two big stories that at least I saw when I was researching. One was Jeff. The other is the Dalby outrages that happened in the early 1900s. It's a series of events that became known as the Dalby outrages. Took place what began as a petty argument over one farmer allowing his animals to stray onto another's land, escalated into full-scale feud over the next 7 years, with the wholesale killing of sheep and cattle, found with necks broken, decapitated with a pickaxe, or driven off a cliff. One of the feuding parties was assaulted with a spade so severely that he was left an invalid. The attacker was imprisoned, but the outrages continued, with the now disabled man's farm being set alight twice.
To call something like that the outrages, as opposed to just like the domestic terrorism.
But it happened for 7 years. That's
we
insane.
need to be naming periods like that more.
Agree.
Outrages.
The
okay,
outrages.
So are we at the part now, because I'm like insatiable for an answer. Does Harry Price now re-enter? Do we get an answer as to what's going on?
In a little bit, yeah. The argument against the fact that he's a spirit is that he eats food and kills rabbits.
Right.
And he shouldn't be able to like touch anything corporeal.
Because I am still team not a spirit. Like I'm always such a skeptic.
Oh yeah, I know.
Okay.
The other argument is
He gets
that he is some kind of reincarnation because he says he's from India. There's a movie that comes out around this time where the narrator is an ex-Indian army officer, and he explained amongst some Indian religious sects, there's a belief that a mongoose is a reincarnated human, and that the one that had refused, so they pit, at some point in the movie, they pit two mongoose, which kind of look like weasels, right?
Yeah.
Two mongoose against each other, against a snake.
Yeah, because they will kill cobras.
Yeah.
It's nuts.
And so one mongoose avoids the snake entirely, and the other mongoose kills the snake. And so he says that the one that had refused to attack the snake had been, in its human existence, a coward.
Oh.
Yeah.
Because mongoose are like the way some communities in India like control the cobra population.
Yeah, exactly.
And stuff.
They're like known to control pests.
Right.
Irving also tells of a visitor to Doarlish Cashen who mentioned an acquaintance who's also an Indian army officer, and the officer had claimed that mongooses could be taught to speak.
I just love the early 1900s. Early 1900s.
Yeah.
Like late 1800s, when like we could just kind of say anything. You
Nothing
know,
matters.
It feels like a time in which they knew science was out there, but they weren't sure what science was true and what wasn't true. Like it was all questions, no answers. You know, so if someone was like, "I have seen a mongoose speak," they'd be like, "Fascinating."
Tell me everything.
And I'm inclined to believe you.
So the last and probably most widely accepted theory is that Voirrey was known to be able to throw her voice.
Oh.
Some thought that she may be a, quote, natural ventriloquist.
Yeah.
However, people even like Harry Price said that there's no such thing as a natural ventriloquist. It takes a lot of training, and also it's very uncommon for young people to be able to do it really easily. And also it's good to remember that throwing the voice doesn't necessarily mean making your voice appear from anywhere. It's a combination of like kind of changing your voice and then also diverting your audience's attention to make it seem like it's coming from somewhere else. And so like it's possible, but it also doesn't make sense as to how he could be like banging on something over here and talking from the walls over here. So there's still a lot of like unanswered questions if that's what happened. Some of her classmates from the time remember her doing this, remember her throwing her voice. There's a couple of them too that seem to be closer with her that say that she couldn't do that or they don't remember her doing that. So that's another one. And a lot of spiritualists were comparing all of the profile of Jeff to all of like the known creatures and cryptids and spiritualist things, trying to see like what he most closely related to. And the two things he most closely related to were a poltergeist and a witch's familiar.
Sorry, I don't know what a witch's familiar is. What's a witch's familiar?
Have you ever seen Sabrina the Teenage Witch?
Yeah, and the talking cat.
The cat's a familiar.
Secondly, because this is our anniversary episode, I love that a year ago I didn't know who Sir Conan Arthur Doyle was, and now I have like a pretty clear criminal profile of him. And he'll show up even as a side character and I'll be like, oh, absolutely, that's something Sir Conan Arthur Doyle would do.
Duh.
And at this point, I think we should take a break so I can stretch
Let's do it. Yeah, I
and...
need to pee.
Cool.
Oh my god. Why do you have a paper towel set?
I'm cleaning off our bathroom sink.
Oh, I was like, what did you do?
The last thing he had said to me was, well, I'm out. And I'm like, well, don't fucking drink lemon pledge.
I'm out.
You live in a very walkable neighborhood.
It's worth it, I promise.
Don't poison yourself. There's plenty of other alcohols to drink.
Jeff would be screaming at you right
Exactly.
now. Okay.
Actually, I mean, obviously we're all having this thought,
Yes.
and I'm glad that we're recording again. But, like, do you think Jeff would have liked you?
I think I would have been just as catty back to him. And I think he would have enjoyed that. I think he would have.
I don't think so.
We'll see some
His
examples.
favorite woman is one who is terrified of him.
No, I think I mentioned this later. In 1931, towards the end, and 1932, him and Voirrey are, like, inseparable.
That's not healthy for either of them.
Yeah, no, we
Or
know.
also the exact reason why Jeff exists, because it's Voirrey throwing her voice the entire
It could
time.
be. It could be. There are some arguments against that.
I'd meet Jeff once, and then he'd out me to the entire village.
Yeah, he would. He absolutely would. Apparently also he would come home and he would leave the home, come back and bring them town gossip.
Fuck yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, Nibs.
I was like, yeah.
I'm in.
I could deal.
You son of a bitch. I'm in.
I'll deal with the talking weasel.
You know what that's a reference to, right? It's
The son of a bitch I meant. Yes.
Yeah. Okay, so that audio is like popular
very
on
famous,
TikTok
yeah.
right now. And this teacher, the TikTok goes, me sitting down for 2 minutes after giving the class instructions, and then it cuts to it's her, but pretending to be a student holding a chair, and it captions the one student that always has to be next to me. You son of a bitch, I'm in.
That's how I feel like Mo is whenever I get up to do anything. She's just like, you son of a bitch, I'm in. And follows me everywhere. Like to the bathroom. I'm in.
Like, I really do strive to be patient and kind and caring.
I get
But sometimes it's because yelling, stop interrupting me, wasn't
work,
working.
yeah.
I've also looked at a couple classes, and this is actually really apropos for the topic that we're talking about
Yeah.
right now. But I'll be in the middle of instructions, and like a lot of kids aren't listening, and they're not being loud with their disruption. They're being really like quiet with it.
Yeah.
And so I'll be in the middle of instructions, and then I'll stop and I'll go, you try talking when that is happening. You try holding a thought beginning to end when all you hear is static
Where
in
are
the
you
background.
What is happening?
Was that him running?
Where? He doesn't have a mail key, so he's not. Where is he going?
I don't know if he has shoes on.
has a-
Casey just fled.
He just opened the door and ran
We
out.
finally got to him. Anyways,
Anyway.
I would love to take over the second bedroom.
Yeah. Perfect. You can have it. The investigation.
Oh, right. Okay, so we're
Yes,
back to Nibs
We're back
and
to
the
Nibs
Irvings.
and Jeff and the whole family. So that letter, if you remember, that letter had been sent to Harry Price in 1932. He's busy. He sends one of his cohorts to go investigate in his stead until he's available.
Okay.
So newspapers are referring to this occurrence as the Dalby Spook. Headlines like Man Weasel Mystery Grips Island in January of
Man
1932.
Weasel Mystery Grips Island.
Yep. Here's another one. This is one of the ones that's like big, then a little bit less big, and then little, and then yeah. Dalby sensation. Stop. Uncanny happenings at farmstead. Stop. Remarkable story of existence of phenomenal creature. Stop. Conversed with and seen by members of the family. Stop. Is it an animal with powers of speech? Stop. Exclusive story told by the Examiner.
What is left to share in that story?
it.
But I also love the way that newspapers were written at the time.
I do too.
But like the teacher in me is like, that's actually so accessible.
It's such a great, but it's also like, I read this and I still do want to read the article because it's like, what the fuck do you mean a phenomenal creature? Whereas some of the like
Right.
Agatha Christie's was like not seen since such and such, suspected to be here. It's like, okay, well you
Has anyone checked there?
you just gave all my answers. So it's like splashed all across the newspapers in 1932. A letter is sent to the Isle of Man weekly newspaper saying, to the editor, after reading your description of the animal called the Dalby Spook, it seems to me very like a mongoose. These animals emit strange noises, but I never heard of one being taught to speak. About 20 years ago, the then owner of Voirrey Cashen, a mountain farm in the Dalby district, liberated a number of those animals to kill the rats, and it is quite possible that the spook is a descendant of one of these.
So they're like, hey, I actually have insider knowledge. We've released a bunch of mongooses. Also, I love that we're talking about mongooses. Have you seen Snoop Dogg narrating Animal Planet videos?
Yes.
Oh, this is one of them mongooses. And they're all about to team up on an alligator or crocodile.
Yes. So this is the point where Jeff gets the moniker from newspapers, Jeff the Talking Mongoose.
Nice.
And that is...
Well done.
That's what this is, yeah. Ironically, that farmer who released all those mongooses in Dalby, near Dalby, his name was Irving.
Oh.
It seems
First
like
name, last name.
last name. It seems like there's... I'm not sure, actually. It just said Irving.
Interesting.
Seems like there's no relationship, but also it's like...
I mean, we know where
wild
the Irvings are. It's
coincidence,
Irving.
yeah.
I mean, is it a wild coincidence? Both of the Irvings' parents shared the exact same name.
I mean, it's true, but they also have very detailed lineages in Liverpool.
Sure.
So shortly after this letter arrives at the Examiner and or at the newspaper and is published, Jeff then identifies himself not as a weasel, but as an Indian mongoose.
Okay, he's like, I am that.
I am that. And then James is quoted at some point saying, I never said he was a mongoose.
And I see your true colors.
So
9
first
months
he was
ago, we
Jack
didn't
the
know
Weasel.
what to do when we
yeah.
started singing, and now it's like, I'm up here.
I'm up here, not down
Okay,
here.
so sorry, you said something
No.
about...
So Jack the Weasel is now Jeff the Mongoose. Let's just process that for a
Okay.
second. He has an identity crisis. Now he's Jeff the Talking Mongoose.
Is this where we get Pop Goes the Weasel? Is this story?
I don't think so.
Okay, good. Okay.
If this is, I have no idea. So back to the talk of Henry Price, or Harry Price. Captain Dennis, the one that Harry Price sends to investigate, makes a total of, I believe, 3 trips out to the Isle of Man to investigate. The first trip happens in February of 1932, so like very early on. The first visit, he goes and is shown about by the Irvings and is shown the damage to the property that the entity has done, as well as like the townspeople. He notes that the story that the Irvings tell him is like identical to the story that people have been telling Price and that other people have recounted. So there's no reason to like disbelieve them there. But late into the evening, Jeff does not say anything while Dennis is there. So late into the evening, he's like, you know what? I'm going to call it a night. Like, I'll be back tomorrow. And decides to head back to the main town because nothing's happened. And right as he was shutting the door, a very shrill, high-pitched voice yelled, "Go away! Who is that man?" At which point, James is like, "That's it.
That was him.
That was him.
You heard it right.
You heard it. Did you hear it?" And they... Jeff continues to talk after this, but Dennis isn't quite able to decipher what he's saying. That kind of continues. He like gets like distant. Like
Jeff knows he's being investigated and plays quiet while he's being investigated.
Exactly.
Okay.
The second visit, Jeff seems to follow the men throughout the day. For example, James goes to one of the nearby inns to meet up with Dennis, and then they were going to walk back. And so they go. They have lunch. Who is it? James. James orders a beer, and then they like walk along like either like the coastline or some like beautiful area, some marshy area. While they're walking, Captain Dennis is like, "This is a beautiful area. Like you should take Margaret here to walk sometime." And he says like, "Oh, she doesn't have the shoes for it. Like we can't afford the shoes for her to be able to walk in this area," which is just another indication that they're not taking money.
Poor.
Yeah, they're very poor. And so they eventually get back to the house. Right as they get into the house, Jeff tells them exactly what they did. He was like, while they were walking as well, Dennis like picks a flower or something like that, and Jeff is immediately like, Jim had a beer. I think he refers to him as Potts. He's like, Potts had a beer, and the other man like picked a flower on the way up here, and it was like right as they walk in.
And Dennis hears it that time.
Dennis
He's like,
hears it. Yep. And so there's like, he notes in his letters to Price that there's not enough time for James to have like colluded with Margaret or anything on that.
To share those notes.
Yeah, and even if Voirrey is throwing her voice, they would have seen her at some point throughout that long walk back.
Right,
and so it's
right.
like even if this isn't a spirit or whatever, if this is like you
How
guys, how are they getting this information? By the third visit in 1935, so we are now 4 years removed from like the original occurrences, Jeff ends up being convinced to make himself known to Captain Dennis, like very outwardly. I think the other time he like says that and then like
disappears again.
Yeah. At some point, I think Voirrey goes to bed and she has a lock on her door. At this point, I think she's 16, 17.
Okay.
17, 18? Yeah, 17. And so she has a lock on her door, theoretically, either to like keep Jeff in or keep Jeff out. I don't know, something. The door is locked. She's in bed. They go up and check on her multiple times throughout what I'm about to say, and she's like not moved. At one point, Jeff does mess with the door and there's like a chair thrown into her room or something like that. But aside from that, it doesn't seem like Voirrey's doing anything weird.
Okay.
And at some point, he gets Jeff to imitate a train whistle. And he makes it like by whistling. And so he makes it a game by like timing how long Jeff can whistle for.
Okay.
It was not like an extensive amount. It was like 20 seconds or something like that. I don't know. After that, this is all a quote. I shouted, "That's splendid, Jeff. Knock the blinking house down." To this, he laughed loudly. I don't know what that means. I don't know. Yeah. So I said, "Jeff, let's have one of your demonical laughs." And then he did it. My blood did not freeze in my veins. I then said, "Do come much nearer to us." And hardly had I finished speaking when the voice came practically to the kitchen entrance and shouted, "Hello, everybody."
Oh.
This occurred 2 or 3 times, and on the 2 latter occasions, I rushed out with my flash lamp through a beam of light up the staircase, only to find no one there, but to be greeted with a shout away in the distance, "You damned Sleech!" Sleech is Manx for a sly man.
Ah.
Yeah. As I was returned down the staircase and just entered the kitchen, a bottle and a china tray were flung from the top of the staircase, the latter being smashed in the fall. This was accompanied by a derisive laugh. I again examined Voirrey's door. It was fastened. The voice then said, "Spies." We asked what that meant, and it replied, "Someone outside the house poaching your rabbits." Mr. Irving and self went out and thought we heard someone, but could not be sure. On returning, the voice said, "I am going." Vanished. Like he says, vanished. But I asked for some more noise, and to finish with that, the voice might come behind the kitchen paneling. After many arguments such as, quote, "You are moving again from your seat." Like, Jeff is like, "Quit fucking moving. You're not catching me. Sit there and I'll put on a show."
I love it.
Yeah.
It's also terrifying.
Terrifying, yeah. We had a terrific repetition of knocks and bangs all over the house, up and down the stairs, and close to us in the paneling, finishing with a shout just behind Mrs. Irving, who was sitting close to the back of the paneling of the kitchen. And that specific point is mentioned just to prove that the sound is coming from behind a wall, because she was sitting so close to the wall that it couldn't be anything like behind her. And then another quote, "As it was 3 a.m., we decided to finish. So I said, 'Go and vanish, Jeff,' to which the voice replied, 'I mean to throw a brick at you tonight when you are asleep.'" He's like, because at this point, Dennis is staying at the house. He has a little room. And so he says, "I had a little room on the ground floor opposite to the kitchen." The voice then said, "I'll throw pebbles now at the window." And almost at once we heard the rattle against the window as if gravel and sand and small stones were being hurled at them. Mrs. Irving got rather perturbed, and Mrs. Irving told Jeff to stop, as she did not want the windows to be broken. I lay on the couch in my room and heard no more until 7 a.m., when a voice from near the roof shouted, "Get up, Dennis!"
Early to bed, early to rise. Late to bed, early to rise.
Yeah, what? They'd only slept like 4 hours. They quit at 3 a.m. And so all of these reports are being sent back to Price. So he's had increasing amounts of interaction with Jeff. I think at some point he finds out that Jeff favors this certain type of cake. And so he brings cake for Jeff, and Jeff
Okay.
loves it. And they think that might be why Jeff was so interested in interacting with Dennis.
Like putting on a show.
Yeah, and it's also because Dennis made it very clear to Jeff on multiple occasions, like, I believe that you're real. And so this became kind of a common occurrence where Jeff would tell James and the Irvings that, like, I'm not going to appear for this person. They seem like doubters.
Oh.
Yeah.
You have to, like, kind of kiss the hand.
Yeah, you have to make it
Okay.
known. But the trick is you don't know where Jeff
Do
is.
you believe in life after death?
After
Not
death.
after death.
Okay. July 30th, 1937. Or 1935. So the same year as this third encounter between
Okay.
Dennis and Jeff. Harry Price finally is able
Arrives.
to come to the Isle of Man. When the trip is first announced to the Irvings, there's a letter sent. Jeff is perturbed and said clearly that he would welcome Captain Dennis, but Price he didn't like. And then he tells James to, quote, ask Price whose was the invisible hand that scattered the violets about the room at night. I asked what he was alluding to, and he answered, quote, you know, Olga and Rudy Schneider. What's interesting about this, Olga and Rudy Schneider is the case that had kept Harry Price from coming to visit earlier. And James didn't know who that was.
Right.
And so the mongoose is like, tell him I know about him. You know? And also, like, he didn't come to see me right away.
This
What the hell?
mongoose is learned.
Yeah. Jeff also claimed that he'd seen Price in the newspaper and that he didn't like the look of him.
Well, you know. He came by his money honestly, through marriage. So, not merit.
Not merit. And so this becomes a common thread. Jeff refusing to talk to those who don't believe in him. He also thought Price seemed like a doubter. Price invited a few people to come and join him. He invited his nemesis, or the person he had friction with.
Okay.
And I think, what's the quote? The guy responds to the letter and was like, I hope the mongoose has stuff to say that's more coherent than the spiritualist, or something like that.
So he invites a doubter. He invites a doubter with
Yeah,
it. Okay.
but he says no. He invites a couple other people. Eventually, he gets his friend Richard Stanton Lambert to come to Doarlish with him. Lambert was the editor of BBC's The Listener.
Okay.
And Price believed him to be open-minded, but skeptical enough to be unbiased party to come with him. Jeff did not make an appearance for the men, but the men agreed from the meeting that after meeting the family, that the family did not act suspicious in any way. They were all very amicable, and both the men would be surprised if this was like an ongoing hoax that they had kept up for 4 years. And they also reported that Margaret was very clearly like pissed off at Jeff for not making an appearance. I think she's like trying to be the good host, and she's like,
right,
these people came all this way just to see you, and you won't see. At some point she delivers this like monologue, like almost in tears, like, I can't believe you would do this time.
If you can't be seen, you might as well be heard, Jeff.
Just like at least bang on something or something. And I think what they think is that she's embarrassed by the fact that these people have traveled all this way and nothing's happening. So Price and Lambert noted the stories from the Irvings and from Captain Dennis and believed that Jeff had an affinity towards Voirrey, or that Voirrey was the key to the whole affair, thinking that maybe she was throwing her voice. But whenever they were in a position to talk with her, she's 17 at this point, by the way, James Irving would dominate the conversation. And so they wanted she wouldn't speak unless like really spoken to, just because of the way that the conversations were going. And it was a similar situation with Margaret.
Okay.
And so they wanted to find a way to get her away so that they could like ask her some more questions and have her be able to talk. They didn't think that she was like introverted or anxious about talking to them. They just genuinely thought she didn't have the time to talk.
Sure.
What'd you get?
I forgot I was supposed to untap the office kegs.
And
What?
you didn't?
Yeah.
His office has kegerators.
So I went and untapped them, and then I wanted a bacon and cheese sandwich.
From where?
His office? They have like a whole Costco repertoire of snacks. It's insane. And a lot of booze and alcohol. It's insane. One time we went there because I was craving chocolate, and that was like the nearest place that we could find chocolate. And we walked in, and his coworker and her partner were just like in there doing work. He's a physical therapist. Like, he was just like writing reports or something. It was like 9 p.m. on like a Thursday.
Were
We
they
like,
also eating chocolates?
I think they're.
It was a Sunday.
Oh, it was a Sunday?
Yeah.
Yeah. We were like, what the hell are you doing here? And they were like, what the hell are you doing here?
We come here for the free food. Well, we come here for the free food.
Okay, anyway. It was funny. Okay. So they wanted to get Voirrey away from the family. They invited her on like a couple different trips, like around the island. And James was like, well, I'll come too. And they were like, that's not the fucking point.
Right.
He like is the king of not taking social cues.
Nice.
They also, Voirrey at this point was exhibiting an affinity towards like engineering, like mechanical stuff, like farm equipment, and the like. And so Price was like, you know what, you can come to London and like tour my lab. Like there's all this cool equipment there. Come by yourself. Like,
Right.
Well, he asked James, like, can Voirrey come? And James, I guess, didn't want her to go alone. And so the trip never ended up happening.
Okay.
So every time they did this, it didn't
Doesn't
end
work
up
out.
working out.
Highly suspect.
Yeah.
Okay.
At some point, though, Price invited James to come speak at a dinner or something about his experience with Jeff.
Sure.
And for whatever reason, the dinner didn't end up happening. It wasn't like it was a ploy to get Voirrey away. But when it happened that James wasn't going to be at the dinner, it seemed like James was more relieved about not having to go to the dinner, and it came off to everyone that heard it that he was relieved because he was anxious about re-entering the society he used to be a part of. Thinking he doesn't have the clothes for it, he's not going to be able to present himself well, and he was like socially anxious, essentially, which is just like an interesting aspect of it. Again, highlighting how poor they are and how like anxious James is to get back into that society. At some point, I think the family is able to convince Jeff to give some of his hair to be examined by a zoologist.
What?
Like,
sorry, that jumped so quick.
Sorry. We're still talking about the investigation. So they give, I think they leave like a small pair of scissors or something in like a bowl for him to like cut his hair and put it in the bowl. And he does a couple of times on multiple occasions. They send it to the zoologist. And so this is what those packages look like.
Oh, gross.
Arriving in the...
I love that they still had the little seals, though. That's so fun. Like little
those.
wax seals.
Yeah. And it turns out...
Oh, it's their dog.
Yeah, the zoologist is like, these don't match any of the animals we have at the zoo, but it does seem to match the specimen I have from dogs. And so they're able to send some of the dog hair, and it matches perfectly to Mona, their dog.
Which is also kind of crazy because there's a chance there actually are mongooses on the Isle of Man that they could have gotten the hair from.
Also, given the fact that it's an entity that seems to like to trick its people, it could also be like, if it is a real mongoose, it could be like, ha-ha.
I think this thread's coming undone.
Oh, yeah.
I think it's... Okay, so we have also gorgeous dog, and you know how rare I say
this
that.
This picture is just so cute. I like had to take a picture of it. Another thing that they did...
I started to look at the other photos, and I immediately snatched it away.
Yeah, they asked Jeff to make imprints of his paws on like different types of clay and stuff, and his teeth to see if they can match it to anything.
Sure.
These are the imprints that were sent.
Okay.
This is a front paw.
Okay.
Oh, sorry. This is a back paw.
What?
These are front paws.
And he says that?
Yes. And those are teeth marks, like his upper jaw.
The teeth marks look weird. They look fake. But he has huge front feet and then small back feet. And also, his feet are different on the front because that and that are not the same foot.
Yeah. It's very strange. And everyone was like, this doesn't make any fucking sense.
Right.
But cool.
Because it's a hoax.
Harry Price ends up also, I think Voirrey wanted a camera, like this is something she's always wanted, and they brought her a camera. This is like the most expensive thing that they're ever gifted out of the entire experience. And they do that to try and convince the family to also use it to get a picture, because they have seen it like on multiple occasions.
Right, they've claimed they've seen this mongoose.
They're like, take the picture and send it to us. These are the pictures that they captured. They're not good with the camera because it's like a new thing or something.
What am I looking at?
I don't know. This hairy thing is the mongoose.
That's a pigeon. That's a pigeon.
It's definitely, I would say it looks more like a skunk or something.
It looks like a rag. This looks like a rag of some sort.
Yeah.
That's a pigeon that's all curled up because it's cold.
I can see it. Yeah. Oh, I could, like the head over here, tail over here. Yeah, this is it apparently like facing that way along a fence, and then this
also,
is it
it's
facing
outside?
the camera.
That doesn't track. In the daylight?
It comes outside a bunch.
Okay.
Yeah, that's how they saw it the first time, and this is the article. Isle of Man's talking mongoose.
Hold on. Hold the shit on. Okay, that's the photo, and this newspaper took a pen and we're like, okay, that's its eyes. Let's go ahead and outline its legs a little bit more. Let's go. Like, this photo right here is so, I mean, that
It's,
might
like,
as well
blurry.
be a teddy bear.
This
and
seems
this
like-
one, they're like, well, here's what we actually think it's supposed to look
Here
like.
it looks like they like upped. If you're familiar with like photo editing, it feels like they upped the like what is it? The grain of the photo, so it's like way more pixelier, and so it's easier to like spot it. I don't
No,
know.
it looks like in my opinion, they took a fountain pen and they like etched out what they wanted it to be.
I agree,
And then the title of the newspaper is Isle of Man's Talking Mongoose, Remarkable Photographs. They were like, look at these photographs. They're remarkable. And there's 2, and they've colored them in.
Yeah. So anyway, at some point, based off of the description that the family has given, Price commissions a drawing, and when Jeff sees the drawing, his quote is, "That ain't me. That more looks like a llama."
Oh, okay.
Ouch.
Well, then you draw a picture of yourself, Jeff.
Oh wait, I was gonna take a screenshot of that.
Why doesn't Jeff emerge when guests are there? Why doesn't Jeff, the talking mongoose who loves to entertain people, be like, and this is me, Stuart Little, but in the 1930s?
We'll talk about it. He does not like newspapers. I think.
Well, how convenient for Jeff.
There's also another reason that we'll talk about in a second.
Is it because he's a fake person?
No, it's because. Hold on. Let me find this. The etch or the picture of. Okay, this is the image that Price has commissioned.
Wow, that's hideous.
Yeah, it has a really big tail for some reason. Okay. So Price finally, after his own experiences, publishes an article
Okay.
about the matter, and he seems to remain on the fence. If you just read his words for what they are, it's like, this is a thing
Sure.
that people are reporting, and I'm not saying it's not true. But he also seems to highlight the lack of hard evidence of Jeff. And so he has a theory. For some reason, it went untested, which is suspicious to me. His theory is that it's Voirrey throwing her voice through the crack of the stone in the wall.
So, like, she slides in between.
Or, no, she's, like, somewhere where there's a gap or something, and she's able to talk into it. I don't think the gap is big enough for her to be in.
Okay.
But theoretically, that's how he's supposing she's getting her voice around. But it also doesn't it was never tested, so they can't prove that she could make her voice appear at will at different places.
Okay.
And it's weird to me that they didn't test it when they were in the house multiple times.
Yeah.
And had, like,
Unless they didn't want
free
to
range.
offend their host with being like, can we have your daughter do this thing that we think will prove that you're
Or
lying to
they didn't
us?
even need the daughter to do it. They could do it and have someone else stand somewhere else to see where it was going. So that to me is weird. So, for example, he writes of his untested theory that the apertures behind the wooden matchboard paneling, together with the matchboarding itself, acting as a soundboard, meant that a voice in one part of the house could be conveyed to other rooms. Price concludes his article with the ambiguous remarks to the effect that, whilst some critics told him that he and Lambert had discovered nothing during their visit to Doarlish Cashen, this was not true. What they had discovered was, quote, why witches were hanged in the 17th century.
Oh.
This remark is open to several interpretations. Does Price mean he believed that 17th century witches' familiars had genuinely existed and that therefore Jeff might also exist? Or is he suggesting fraud then and now with victims of the witch trials pretending to be witches and pretending to keep familiars with tragic results? Or that the alleged witches labored under the delusion that they were consorting with familiars?
Well, interesting there. I know what side I'm landing on in terms of that quote.
I also just love the fact that I feel like, is so playing devil's advocate that he's like, I know Jeff reads the paper, and I don't want him to have any, he didn't give me any concrete evidence. I'm not giving him any concrete evidence that I'm a doubter.
Verifying him,
but like, also, if you leave it up to interpretation, that quote, why 17th century witches got hanged, is...
It's the side that you want to
insane.
believe on. Because if you think that these things are real, they're like, yes, exactly. And if you think they're not real, you're like, yes, exactly.
That's such a... whoever's PR team, amazing job.
Houdini.
Probably. So the Irving family hated the article for multiple reasons. However, the reasons that I saw them disliking it, they were like, okay, it seems like you don't believe us. And that was like its own thing.
Right.
The main reason they didn't like the article was because the pictures that were published of the family made them look morose.
Of them looking possessed?
Yeah, and so they were like, why did you pick those pictures of all the pictures that we took? Because I think that's when they delivered the camera, and so there was probably a lot of pictures taken of them.
Sure.
And then also in the article, Harry Price recounts Jeff being violent right at the beginning, but he says it was 1934, and then also says that the incident where they moved the bed into the family's room is that same year.
Okay.
And James was annoyed that insinuates that he moved his 16-year-old daughter into his room.
Oh.
And he was like, that's not accurate and not true.
She was younger.
She was a lot younger, and she has her own room now. And so he also, Harry Price also insinuated that by saying that Jeff was aggressive into 1934, which makes it seem like the family tolerated that for 3 years.
Right, for too long.
Yeah, which is just like also not true. So anyway, that's where we're at. By 1936, the family is clearly annoyed by Jeff.
Okay.
Like the entire family. It seems like James is like the only one who's like, of all the annoyance, he's the least annoyed.
Okay, and even he's over it.
And even he's like, okay.
And at 36, there's still 6 more years of this that's going to happen.
Yes.
Okay.
So Price actually sends a couple undercover investigators to like continue the investigation.
Okay.
And which is fine. It seems like the Price family is like kind of aware that that's what's happening, but they're not. They like ask the investigators, they're like, do you know Harry Price? And every time they're like, no. But
who's that?
yeah, but it also seems like the Irving family is like, I don't like, sure, you can come.
Right.
Like, Jeff's not going to show himself. We've been over this multiple times. Like, you can ask us whatever questions. That's fine.
And he's not going to come because we're skeptical, because it's a hoax.
Yeah. So one of the undercover investigators, she's a woman, and I cannot remember. She like used an undercover alias of like Mrs. Calhoun or something.
Sure.
That's not her real name. I think her last name is actually Nichols. Miss Nichols reported that in 1936, quote, Mrs. I and V are frank in their references to him. They say they recently told him that he had been nothing but a curse to the place. In 1932 and 1931, she also notes that V and Jeff had been inseparable, but now that V is 18, V seems to feel some resentment towards Jeff.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, could be for a number of reasons. She's getting bullied.
Right.
Everyone thinks it's her. Even if it is, it's like, it still sucks to be like ostracized
this
for that.
This ghost ferret is possessive of this young woman.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then V also tells Nichols she was bored with Jeff and would not mind if he went away and never came back again.
That's so much meaner.
She's like, I fucking hate this guy.
You're a curse. Sure, mean words are mean, but honestly, like, I'm just kind of bored with this whole thing. Oof.
Yeah.
You hate my personality.
Yeah. Okay. God damn. Okay. James is quoted saying that Jeff is not amenable to their wishes. At this point, he's the most amenable to Margaret's wishes, but even then, it's like not super great. He doesn't seem to respond to Voirrey or James at all. And he says that if Jeff were amenable to their wishes, the family would no longer be on the aisle because they could charge money, be like, hey, come in, we know for certain Jeff will interact with you, and we can make a fuck ton of money off of this, so why are we still here? In 1939/1940, Voirrey leaves to work as a mechanist for an engineering firm for Dalby Aviation. Jeff continued to make appearances through 1942, but from 1939 to 1942, he would be silent for longer and longer periods of time. Like Tinkerbell.
Oh, or like Voirrey, because she's not there anymore.
Yeah, it's not super clear.
Okay.
Like if there were only experiences with Jeff when she was home, because she came home like every few weekends or something like that. James did, contrary to his desire, die on the Isle of Man of an illness in August of 1945, still firmly believing in Jeff. A literal hill that he died on. And it's Dalby Mountain. It's like literally a hill he died on.
What was the alternate title? Because you gave me
Walls
two.
Can Talk.
The Walls Can Talk. Okay. Hilarious. Still believe. So he dies still believing in Jeff. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. After he dies, the house goes up for auction. Another reason that they couldn't move to is that the house's value had depreciated so much because of all of this. So that was another reason that they couldn't move or burn the house down or whatever. The house went up for auction and only sold for £140. and he had bought it for $310.
Like years ago, like 2 decades earlier. What year did they sell the house?
1945.
Okay, so he dies, they sell the house.
Yeah. I think
It
Margaret.
bankrupts them.
Yeah, Margaret moves into the city. Elsie comes to stay with the family for a little bit while he's dying, and both
Okay.
Elsie and Margaret recount like strange happenings around the house around the time he died. There's like some weird occurrence that happened like right at the moment he died that I
Okay.
don't quite remember. It was like a broom moving on its own or something. The person that bought the house at the auction, ironically, ended up selling it only a few months later on account of like him not feeling comfortable in the house.
Sure, could see.
Yeah. And then he sold it. The new owner was Leslie Graham, a known doubter. And shortly after, he had reported seeing a strange animal on the property that didn't make sense. And
How long do ferrets live for? Because at this point, this thing is like 12, 13 years
I have no
old.
idea. He did end up killing a polecat he had seen around numerous times of the property. So this is a polecat.
Oh, okay.
This
That's a ferret.
is a mongoose.
Those are the exact same animals.
Yeah. So they're pretty similar.
Wait, is he claiming that that was Jeff?
That's how it's reported, that was Jeff. But
So the newspaper in 1940, Jets exist at that point.
Yeah.
And they're like, we finally killed this talking mongoose.
you can totally see too that the newspaper wants to keep riding the high of Jeff the talking
Right,
mongoose.
right.
In 1942 they publish an article that's like the talking mongoose active again, and it's like in the article there's no details.
Are you about to tell me that this is where the mystery just ends? They like never solve it? That's so upsetting.
They do.
That's actually what?
So
No. And then
hold on.
Voirrey on her deathbed is like, it was me the entire time.
So this is the picture that was published of him with the dead mole cat. Talking mongoose killed. Jeff, famous Dalby Spook, is snared. Went out without a word of protest. Which is
what a great
hysterical.
subheading.
So they have pictures of that, and the newspaper, Voirrey only ever did one interview for a newspaper.
Okay.
Ever. She never took any money from this. At some point, some newspaper did find her in the new city that she was living in when she was much older, and she said, like, the town I'm living in, everyone knows everything about everyone, and if this were to get published,
Sure.
I don't want people talking
I don't
want
wanna be that my-
I don't
that
want
my
to be
personality
that
again.
person.
Yeah.
But she was showed a picture of the dead polecat, and she said, no, that thing is much bigger than Jeff was, and the color does not match, or the color patterning. Like, it's the same color, but it had like spots instead of like solid. It was
Sure.
She said it didn't match.
But she was like, Jeff exists, and it was a mongoose, and it was...
She also stayed on that train forever. This was going to be my opening before I found all of this information.
The whole book that you read
Yeah.
on the mongoose?
In November of 1936, so
okay.
like towards the end of Jeff's, like he was starting
Most
to fade
active
out.
years, yeah.
Yes. There's a slander action case that was heard at the High Court of Justice,
Okay.
where R.S. Lambert, the editor of The Listener that came to the island with Harry Price, author and broadcaster for the BBC, was being sued by Lieutenant Colonel Sir Cecil Levita, a former chairman on the London City Council. Both men held high-ranking positions, and so the case got a lot of media coverage.
Sure.
But what really helped publicize the case is the bizarre nature of the details. So this is like the opening chapter of the book, and I just want to read to you.
I love that we've spent 2 hours talking about what I am still
absolutely
sure
insane.
is a fake talking
Oh
mongoose.
yeah, but I want to know how it happened. So basically, the case that's happening is that the person that's suing Lambert is saying that Lambert is unfit to serve.
Okay.
And like is unsound of mind, basically. And one of the reasons is that it's not that he believes in the mongoose, but he's not saying that the mongoose doesn't exist.
The way they all stick to the middle of the road, they're
Yeah.
like, I didn't see it, and I'm not convinced, but I'm not also confident enough to declare it a fraud.
And I think
Middle
he
of the road,
published
pick a side.
something about it, or about the mongoose itself. Much of the transcript reads like an absurdist Alice in Wonderland version of a court case. It becomes apparent that, taking their lead from the judge, the counsels went along with the fun. At some point early on in the case, the judge was like, stop fucking laughing. Like, this is a serious thing. And then he starts hearing about the mongoose, and the judge is like,
all right.
okay. Thus, as the Daily Mirror reported, quote, mongooses, mongeese, or mongai? Question baffles court in slander suit.
It's their version of moose.
Yeah, exactly. Justice Swift asked, he was not traveling in mongeese or mongooses? He then pondered what the plural of mongoose might be. The judge, by the way. The judge is doing this.
This is a Larry David sketch.
Yeah. I should not venture to suggest, said Mr. Beresford for the defense, whilst the judge suggested to Mr. Lambert that, as the author on the subject, he ought to know. I feel sure it is mongoose, said Mr. Beresford, but Mr. Justice Swift was not so sure. I think it's mongooses. If the plural is referred to in the future, I think we had better say mongai. This is the court transcript. Mr. Justice Swift. Did you see, as you went to the Isle of Man, 3 legs or any cats without tails? Laughter in the court. Mr. Lambert. We saw a cat without a tail. Mr. Justice Swift. I have never seen a mongoose on the Isle of Man. I have seen them in other places. Tell me, Mr. Beresford, does a mongoose in the Isle of Man have a tail or not? Laughter in the court. Mr. Beresford held up the book Haunting of Cashen's Gap, which is a book published about this, and replied, your lordship will see from the illustration on the outside cover, inspired by Mr. Price and this gentleman, Lambert, that this mongoose has a bushier tail than usual. Laughter in the court. Much hilarity then ensued as Mr. Beresford directed his attention to the photograph in The Haunting of Cashen's Gap. Mr. Justice Swift carefully studied the picture and asked, which is the mongoose? Mr. Beresford, I should imagine that the piece of rock sticking out in the middle of the photograph with the piece of mud clinging to the end is intended for Jeff. That's what you said, the picture that I showed you.
Yes.
Yeah. Mr. Sir Patrick Hastings, I think my learned friend is quite wrong. Jeff is at the bottom. That is obviously Jeff. Mr. Justice Swift, how do you know what Jeff looks like? Sir Patrick, it is so short of hairs at one end. Mr. Justice Swift, have you seen Jeff? Sir Patrick, no, my lord, but I've seen a picture of the hairs of Jeff. That is an actual...
Jane Austen could never.
So following the conclusion of the case, James Irving was asked for a quote. He told a Daily Mirror journalist that Jeff, quote, had not been seen outside of the world since October 1935. So he does make a few appearances after this.
Okay.
But it still speaks to us, and we see it practically every day. He had not been seen by the outside world since October 1935, which I think is when Captain Dennis saw him last.
Okay.
But he still speaks to us, and we see it practically every day. This morning it killed a rabbit by strangling it. The fuck? And
God.
brought it to the house just as it was. It is quite friendly with every member of the household and talks to us and roams the house. The Lambert Levita mongoose case is one of several court actions associated with Jeff. So, final thoughts. What are your final thoughts?
You did a wonderful job captivating me for 2.5 hours on a mongoose I'm convinced did not exist.
But then how did it exist? Like, how did those occurrences happen?
So, to be clear,
Yeah.
outside of the family, we have a handful of observations and experiences.
Yeah.
And the most airtight, hard to discredit thing is that on their walk back, they did a couple things that the ghost was able to relate to. Never mind the fact that, like, beforehand, it might have been like, I'm going to go to the beer, I'm going to go to the tavern, I'm going to have a beer, we're going to walk along.
But then how did he know that the guy was going to pick a flower?
They walk in, you go, chew the, I mean, like, you know.
No, that's fair. My then question is, how did Jeff make all the wrappings around the house simultaneously when Dennis was there?
Whereas everyone in the room at the same time?
Voirrey wasn't. But the wrappings happened in a room that she was not in.
We're convinced of that? Okay. I'm not.
But, like...
School children who are in on it.
I mean, that's fair. My thing is that the gap between the wall and the other wall, I don't think was big enough for her to fit at 16, 17.
Right.
So how was there... I'm not saying I believe in the mongoose. I'm just questioning
Pulleys
how
and
the
levies.
fuck this
If it's
happened.
not big enough for a person to fit in, it's probably big enough for, like,
Something
I mean, they
happened.
already said there's no more big spoons left in the house. Like, do you know? Like from her bed, she like undoes a panel and like pulls all the cords at the same time.
I do want to mention, just for the sake of journalistic integrity, there are, I think, like a psychiatrist and another guy, maybe total of 3 other men that I didn't write the names down. Some of the pictures came from one of them especially, that also stayed at the house and also had interactions with Jeff.
Right, okay. I mean, but none of them like saw this ferret stand up on a table and like move its mouth and talk, which is what Jeff would need to do to prove that he's a talking mongoose.
I don't know that the family ever saw him.
Do you know
talk
what
in front
my
of them
biggest
either.
evidence is?
Yeah.
The 2 older siblings GTFO'd. They got out and they didn't go back regularly and visit their like weird youngest sister and her parents.
That's fair.
Like this family's like, we're haunted by a mongoose, and their 2 children don't like rush in and save them. Like, we're haunted by a mongoose, and they're not like, burn the house down and come live with me in Edmonton or wherever else. I mean, like, it'd be one thing if that's what her name was?
Voirrey.
It'd be one thing if Voirrey was like an only child, and maybe understand that a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I'm also confused too. Like, I think, like, this man, we said at the very beginning, we're talking about James Irving now, right? That's his name. Yeah, James. Speaks multiple languages, not necessarily a dumb guy, is making what is by today's standards a really nice salary in London. And I understand that like then they hit some bad economic times, but it sounds like he was a man of merit and ability and at least modest connections.
Yeah.
And I'm confused as to how he then spirals down to like poverty on the Isle of Man with like basically as a subsistence farmer, when it sounds like there's industries on the Isle of Man, like there's an engineering firm and stuff. So like,
No.
Isn't that where she goes off to work?
I don't get the impression that it was on the Isle.
Okay.
Yeah.
But like, you know, like I don't understand how a successful man like that spirals down to a situation like that if there isn't other factors at play.
Yeah.
Right? Like you become really skeptical of things or like you start to shun society a lot, things like that. Like you go through a mental health crisis and you lose everything, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the number one driver of foreclosures in America is actually medical debt.
Yeah.
And so it's like something happens that upsets the course of your life
Yeah.
and then you're left with what is left, you know? I think it's a complete and total fraud.
I don't necessarily disagree. There's just no hard evidence either way.
Right.
And so I don't think I'm as much of a skeptic as Grant is.
That's true about every episode we do, though.
Yeah. I think I wish there was still more like substantive research into like cyclical, like spiritualist stuff. I think that would make my decision on like if I think it's real or not easier. Because right now, like, I can't help but think that, I don't know, like back when Galileo was like doing all of his research and stuff, we thought the like sun revolved around the earth, right? There's been huge transitions in like our understanding of the world around us over the years that like now we look back on those people and we're like, the fuck?
Right.
Like you didn't know that, you know? And so like we have a lot of technology now and I kind of wish that it wasn't as stigmatized to like look into those kinds of things at the very least. That's point number one. Point number two, I don't understand how some of these things were happening. Like I can see Voirrey using like the soundboards, but I don't understand the rapping. I don't understand how she was able to do that sometimes when she wasn't present in the house. There was one occasion, I think, with Dennis, where Dennis, James, and Margaret were sitting in the kitchen, and Voirrey had gone off to like feed the chickens or something, and Dennis could see her in the window, and then he was getting pelted with like stones or something in the kitchen, which is like there are plenty of like mechanical ways to like emulate that, like a lot of fraudulent mediums do, but I just want to know. You know?
The 1920s and 30s is not like the Stone Age by any means.
Yeah,
There's
they have
radios,
stuff.
there's recordings, there's electricity.
Yeah.
You know, I think...
What I really want to know is what their motivation was, because that's what's unclear. If it was money, that's like obvious. If it was like the women trying to get him to leave, that seems obvious. But it seems like there's so many outs for them.
Sure.
And so many like instances where they were even like for a long time they stopped accepting visitors at all because they were like, we're so fucking sick of this. But like,
or is that also maybe a sign of like social spiraling? They moved from like the heart of London to an island in the middle of a
middle of
cold
nowhere.
sea.
Yeah.
And then on that island, they live between two villages.
It's hard to
And
get to.
they are not welcomed by the people around them. They were already shunned. Like, does it just become a projection of what they're experiencing? Do they share like a common, what is the term, like neurosis or whatever?
Yeah.
Like, do they share a common experience? You know how, like, this is actually really interesting. So early on in their life, twins will develop a language that only
They
they
can
are able to
understand,
understand. And it's like, it meets all the marks of a language. And then they oftentimes lose it when they like learn. But like, stuff like that can happen amongst humans who are like constantly in each other's presence, who are isolated. Yeah, I'm not saying it's like, oh, it's twin language, right? But it's like, does this all become
Something, some common experience.
Right,
yeah.
and also, if I remember correctly, maybe I'm a little late on this, but the introduction of parks into urban spaces is actually a really recent thing, like within the last 100 years. It definitely happens after the Industrial Revolution happens.
Right.
And so these people might have gone from like having never seen a squirrel, having never seen, a polecat or whatever it's called, to have never really experienced animals that weren't specifically livestock, to being surrounded by it and then maybe be enchanted by those, magical creatures or whatever,
Yeah.
I just think, one, you're never probably going to be able to convince me unless it's like, and then here's a video of this mongoose standing in this table talking and interacting. Like,
I need
and
to
also,
see it,
it's so odd too. Like, what
It
is
is odd.
the ghost of a potential deli boy doing in the Isle of Man? Like, how did it get there? And it's never able to like clarify that properly.
I don't know. I have a lot of questions. I think I'm very much Harry Price in the situation, a devil's advocate. My last note is that the Doarlish Cashen was demolished in 1971, so it's actually no longer there.
71, you said?
Yeah, 71. But I think the remains are still there. The author of the book that I wrote, which, by the way, if you're interested, it reads a lot like fiction. It was like very interesting to read. It's called Jeff! The Strange Tale of an Extra Special Talking Mongoose by Christopher Joseph. It was very good. My other sources were articles from Weird History, Hyperallergic, Atlas Obscura, Nat Geo, Tree Hugger, American Hauntings, the Manx Scrapbook by Walter Gill, and then a video on YouTube from Culture Van In. It's a super interesting case because there's definitely some psychological factors at play whether or not Jeff is real. Like why the family acted in the way that they did. I don't know. I think it's really cool. Also, just the term Jeff the Talking Mongoose is an insane thing to say.
So I think it's The Hills We Die On Part 1. Jeff! Exclamation point. Or
G-E-F or J-E-F-F?
Oh, J-E-F.
Okay.
Or The Hills We Die On Part 1. Friends in Weird Places. That might be a little long. I can think of more stuff, but
I like
it'll
Friends
take a
in
second.
Weird Places.
Yeah?
I do. We'll talk about it.
All right, we'll talk about it. Thanks for listening. Hopefully you have stayed around the entire time.
Yes.
If you would like to connect with us or see some of the visual content, you can find us on basically all social media where we are Well I Laughed. We post the full video on YouTube where we are Well I Laughed Podcast.
For YouTube?
Yeah.
Just while I left.
Just Well I Laughed, great. You can find us on Patreon for more additional content. And you can email us at wellilaughdpod@gmail.com.
Okay, thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
Don't talk to your cats.
Or do.